All right, recording in progress. Hash Church, here we come. Let's just wait for us to go live here. I got a couple of things. I got to record and I got to go live on it on YouTube. So right now YouTube hasn't quite gone live, and I don't know if that's because I went a little early. We'll see. We'll see. But we're waiting. Let's see if it's going to give us the love. Do not see it. Come on, come on, come on. Let's go live. There I am. There I am. All right. Sorry, there's a delay sometimes where I don't know if it's going to go live and I'm going to show up on the chat. But there I am, and there all you are, Bingo Lombardi, holding it down in the chat. We got John Maddox, obviously. OG Brick 420 just bought a membership for 5 months, I believe, or maybe it's that he's been a member for 5 months. I don't know. I'm all confused. Thank you, because I am hella grateful, Cannabis Kawaii. I am hella grateful. Shout out to Michael Franti for the t-shirt. I got this at one of his last concerts. So let me start with welcoming everyone to this beautiful show on Hash Church today. I'm going to have to quickly do a couple of things here. There we go. I had to find that. So I'm going to open this up real quick. And I guess I got to close this because I hadn't opened it first. So I'm going to open it again. And I'm going to give a big shout out to my dear friend Soma, who is, I guess he's a little bit sick right now. He's not feeling too good. So from the Hash Church family, dear Soma, from the heart of the Hash Church community, we are sending you a wave of love and healing energy all the way to Amsterdam. Your passion and your spirit have touched so many of us over the years, and we hold you close in our heart and in our thoughts as you navigate this challenging time. May you feel the warmth of our collective embrace, lifting you up and bringing comfort, rest, heal, and know that you are surrounded by a family that cherishes you deeply. Wishing you strength and recovery, dear friend, with all our love from the Hash Church community. I'm not sure how serious it is. I did see that he was in the hospital and that he had missed some of his seizure medications. So we're sending our love out to Soma. First and foremost today, that is the message I wanted to send before I said anything else. And hopefully when Soma's better, when, not if, he'll come on to Hash Church and we'll talk. I feel so blessed that I got to go visit him in Amsterdam recently when I went back for Dave's celebration of life. And so shout out to Soma. You are loved, my friend. You are loved. In the meantime, let us get to our new sponsors because they also support us. And we have a new sponsor. I want to give a big shout out to the Press Club. Trusted by top hash makers from around the world since 2016, the Press Club is your one-stop shop for award-winning solventless gear. From press bags to wash bags to presses to vessels, you'll find everything you need from wash to press. We're big fans of the Press Club and what they're doing for the community, so we're excited to have them on board as an official sponsor for Hash Church. We got made in the USA, patented pink stitches, zero blowout guarantee. That's a pretty good guarantee. Not sure I would give that one, but that's pretty awesome. Small family-owned business, free expedited shipping on any orders over $75, international shipping available as well, and you can visit them at www.thepressclub.co. And if you use the code HashChurch, all capitals, they're going to take 10% off your purchase. So big shout out to them. Big shout out to Puffco. Big thanks to Puffco for sponsoring Hash Church once again. Puffco has revolutionized cannabis culture, normalizing extracts with their incredible portable devices like the Puffco Peak Pro, the Pivot, and the Proxy. These amazing little units deliver top-tier performance and style, making them favorites in our community. Puffco's unwavering support for all things cannabis keeps us lit and united. Check them out at Puffco's Got Your Back, www.puffco.com, and you can find them on Instagram at Puffco. Ready to take your grow to the next level? Grandmaster LED is bringing the heat with cutting-edge lighting solutions designed for growers who demand the best. Whether you're battling pests or chasing perfect yields, we've got you covered with the latest innovation. The UVC Tarantula Predator, the ultimate IPM bug light. This bad boy harnesses the power of UVC technology to zap mites, thrips, aphids, and more, keeping your garden pristine without chemicals or hassle. Pair it with a Grandmaster LED top-tier grow light, and you've got a setup that's unbeatable for potency, flavor, and peace of mind. Waterproof, daisy chainable, and built to last. Tarantula Predator is your new secret weapon. Tune into Hash Church to hear the pros rave about Grandmaster LEDs, then grab yours at grandmasterleds.com. Use the code HashChurch10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Light up your grow the Grandmaster way, because your plants deserve the best. Let's be honest. They do deserve the best. And I also want to give myself a shout out because my goodness, I should shout myself out as well. Let me just find the way. We're going to shout out the bubble bags. Let's see where we are, bubble bags. Looks like you've been blown out. Bubble bags stand out as a premier choice for water hash extraction, and it's no surprise why. They're the original innovators who set the standard in quality and performance. Crafted with durability in mind, these bags come out with a lifetime warranty, ensuring you're covered for years of consistent use. The team behind Bubble Bags takes pride in their pioneering legacy, backing every product with an unwavering confidence and a commitment to excellence, making us the trusted go-to for enthusiasts and professionals alike seeking top-tier hash extraction results. www.bubblebag.com #church10 will give you the discount code, and I think that's it for now. So let's get to the show. I got someone coming in. I don't know who it is. Oh shit, brother, look at that. Now that's how you come into Hash Church right there. That is how you come into Hash Church, on time and on the ball. Very cool. Not quite. You'll take a bit. You'll get your audio set up and you'll come in. It'll be fucking great. Happy to have you here, brother. Just see what I got to do this good morning on Hash Church. Man, I got a lot of stuff going on. Holy Christ. Fred Gardner. Supposed to get Patrick. We got a whole bunch of people. M. Muhammad, Canacraft, Mark. There we go. Can you hear me, brother? You're still having a hard time. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. How you doing?
Good. I'm not that familiar with this stuff, so I just kind of press some buttons and I see my face and I see yours. So,
dude, you crushed it, bro. You absolutely crushed it. Looking good too. Not gonna lie. I like that face.
well, appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Well, welcome to Hash Church. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing the good things out there. It's hard for us on Hash Church because I want to have, there's so many great people I want to have on Hash Church. Hash Church was always about, expanding the community. It was never supposed to be about like, having a place on Hash Church. It's like everyone's welcome on Hash Church, and come and share what they're doing in a different part of the world, talk about, this whole journey that really a lot of us are on together,
Yeah.
especially the community. I mean, we have a very unique community because our community, very much the way there's this medical and recreational, you have community and industry. And they're two very different things. And so, obviously, in my opinion, the industry has a little bit less soul. It has a little bit less compassion and empathy, and the community is all soul and all empathy and all compassion, or at least I like to pretend that it is. Of course, we have some parasites that get in, but as we know from regenerative organic farming, that even bugs have their place in growing good cannabis. So we just got to figure out how to get those parasites on point, share them the right information. It's amazing. I take hits on the nonstop, endless hits. My most recent one, because I supported my friends from Canada, really good friends. My friend Kat has worked there for a super long time. My buddy Neil used to grow with with their nutrients and grew beautiful cannabis that I just couldn't really turn my back on at the same time. I'm a much more into living soil, regenerative, organic. Someone absolutely got upset with me that I promoted canna in any way, shape, or form. And I kind of said, as I get older, I try not to just choose. I mean, listen, I had a solvent extract episode 3 months ago. I don't do solvent extracts, but what I do and what I do recognize is that the scene is bigger than me and my personal likes. And although 10 years ago I was delusional and thought everyone needed to smoke bubble hash and put away their joints and stop rolling paper and, not use solvent extracts. And that was my ego and my head getting a little bit too big for my own shoulders. And now I just try to show respect for whatever it is that people prefer. And if I want to inspire them, if I want to have that mentality of like, you should be smoking what I'm smoking, well, I don't say it that way. I'll just say, hey, you want a dab? And then offer them one and share in that sort of way. So, yeah, I'm not sure really where that little rant came from, but there it is. I got this
There it
the other
is.
day.
Yeah, when you dive into the worlds of platforms that open you up to a lot of different places, you're going to always end up with the judgment side of things. So people are going to come in, and whether they like you or whether they don't like you, they're going to they're allowed to place their opinion. So everybody can kind of say whatever they want, and
Dude.
anybody who's confident in their journey don't have to be too affected by it. And if you're spending too much time digging into somebody else's comment, and worrying about it, it's affecting your life, then you maybe that's a sign that you just have more work to do, and the ego is still a big part of it, because ultimately, not that nobody's going to get rid of their ego. That's just part of being human. You have it while you're
Hmm.
here. You can recognize it and separate yourself from it at times, so you don't have to get sucked into the drama that the ego can create. So, you know, I think it's great. I think it's awesome that there's a place for anybody to share any information they want. And if people are still that immature in their evolution of their relationship to their ego, that they have to basically put other people down to try and make them seem better or something, then then they're just on that journey, and we wish them well, and hopefully they have realizations that help them grow beyond that. So you know
Absolutely. I've been on that journey myself. Absolutely.
yeah, I think
100%.
we all have.
Absolutely have been on that journey. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, it is what it is. I guess, and I really only had this sort of epiphany very recently, but the epiphany was the less things that I have opinions about, the less angst and upset and disturbed energy I have in my soul and in my body. And so I've been practicing that quite a bit lately, just kind of like, you know what? Do I need to die on this hill? Is this the hill that I need to die on? Because I'm, obviously a very opinionated person. I've had opinions about all sorts of things over the years, but as I kind of get a little older and get a little wiser, and of course, very grateful. Yeah, I'm a little bit more easygoing, and I can see things in a different light. And I guess that's one of the beautiful things of getting a little older.
Yeah, you gotta. I think what we have to do as we get older is recognize that we get triggered, and then and that triggered, you can if you can acknowledge that you've been triggered, ideally the soul can step back and not allow action to continue from that point, and then ask the self, what's the best action forward to create the ultimately the best outcome, which as far as I'm concerned, is positive uh vibes and good feelings. And so, what do we want to promote uh, while we're sharing ourselves and our perspectives um, on these platforms in this virtual world? Uh, to me, I feel like we need to be somehow helping people understand how to tune into those good vibes. And so, uh, all we can do is not participate in that which creates negativity. and participate in that which feels good. And so if you're doing that, I feel like, you know, we're talking about, this is church. This isn't a place for judgment. This is a place to share our beliefs in our soul. And those of us who have endeavored deeply into the realms of this journey with this plant have a lot of spiritual connections to it, even if you don't realize them, because sometimes the plant is actually taking you on a journey you're not necessarily in control of. Um, if you can start to recognize the power in the plant, I think you can symbiotically work with that energy and kind of like create something better than either one without the other can create. So humans and ganja, we manifest worlds that don't exist unless both entities are involved. And so, we
Yeah,
try.
you guys are touching on some stuff, and hey, guys, nice to see you guys today. And
Up
sorry
on.
it's late, my man. Dealing with young kiddos today. I hosted a panel yesterday with Dutch. Actually, I brought Dutch Blooms and Fang and a bunch of other breeders out to New York, and we had New York Small Pharma hosted an event. That was the Farmers Forum in a Farmers Craft Cup, which is really cool out in New York. And we had generational difference in terms of age, and then perspective differences in terms of how you approach breeding, right? And everyone had a different perspective as to, we used, the abstract analogy of color, where one gentleman was saying, I really want to bring these older colors to life, and I really think it's important to reinstill these older, colors back into the modern contemporary world. And then Fang jumped in. He was like, yeah, it's really cool, but what if we looked at it like we're taking all these colors and taking blue and making it like neon and adding polka dots to it and texture and making it silky? And I thought it was really interesting because everyone had a very different perspective, but they all could agree that moving the idea of breeding forward through selection and good selection and opening up population and doing open pollination, because I asked them the questions about how they pollinated and how they selected. It was a lot of it was a lot of different perspectives, all kind of converging at an agreeing and agreeing on that open pollination is really a great thing to do. And there was a lot of experience on that panel. Dutch Blooms talked a lot about his library and how it's great to be able to clean up some of these older genetics and recirculate them. And someone else felt like it's not great to be having everyone be growing the same things. But at the convergent point for me, for everyone had different ideas, but the concept of pollination was it's better to open pollinate than to select one single female. And then Fang jumped in again, said, hey, I'd like to go wide, but then I'd like to be really intentional. So, again, there's a lot of ego, but a lot of really, I mean that in a really, like very experienced way of saying that. So there's a lot of experience on the panel, but they all agreed on things that I thought were generally really highly complex. I mean, selecting males is something that's very individual, as you know. Um, but I think everyone started to kind of let the ego go away with the idea of open pollination, and I think that's really, it was really great. It was a really great panel to hear Josh and Fang speak about, the tenor in the industry. Fang talked a lot about his Mendo breath and his Gage Green and the things that they did to get to that. And there was a lot of it was really interesting. It was, we had a lot of interesting perspectives, and I would think I see Ryan jumping in. Ryan would have really appreciated the conversation because it went in a lot of different directions. But it was really cool to see everyone kind of agree that we need to kind of open up the population a bit more and keep it alive rather than narrow it down. So it's very much the spirit of the conversation where
Yeah.
let the plant do the work,
Yeah.
go back in.
Again, like, this is we were talking about earlier, just like what lens you put on and choose to look through in order to, I don't know, advance your own evolution. To say one thing is right and one thing is wrong is, I don't know if that's necessarily necessary. There are benefits to both opening up populations through open pollination. There's a bunch of different ways to do open pollination with selection still involved. And there's also a whole lot of value. If you are a breeder, you have to narrow things if you want to be trying to create the things that the markets are asking for, or this uniformity idea that comes with industry, capitalism, money making, and products. Yeah, I don't buy into any of that side of it anymore, just because it certainly is something humans are capable of doing. We can work in a breeding way to get something into a point where it works really well this way or that. But I think the lens that you look through, it's open pollination is good, inbreeding is good. If it all depends on the outcome that you're looking for, and everybody has their own personal input in their process, and so that personal input is gonna play a large role in the outcome. And if you're looking to grow from seed in field, you want to pay attention to one thing. But if you're looking to grow from clone, there's a lot less factors to deal with. You just have to explore and find that one which you would like to do. I think the capitalist market is most friendly to clone growing because of what it wants. It wants uniformity. It wants all these things that I'm not that interested in. And so if I advise people in the industry or in the market standpoint, to say, do your pheno hunting and make your clones.
Sure. Hey, Nick, can you give us a little introduction to you and kind of your scene and Green Source Gardens? Give us a little kind of Hash Church, breakdown on a little bit of who you are, what you've been doing, where you're at with it, because I think that would be helpful for the Hash Church audience.
Yeah, my wife and I and the family, we endeavored in the legal rec market years ago. I mean, we were in it for 8 years or something. We've been out of it for a couple of years now. And we kind of went at it with our own slant, which was really important to us, which was this philosophy around everything's from seed, everything's about the evolution of cannabis. We're not trying to hold this up. We're trying to essentially do this all from seed and in natural cycles and without lights, without inputs, nutrients, without products from a store. This is really an endeavor of connection to the environment and connection to the climate. And so it was really important for us to be really kind of adamant and stubborn around how we choose to play. And, it made things really hard at times, but it also by sticking to that, it opened up this world of information that we were able to gather from until, it will go on forever at this point. So, we had landed we figured out, we got some money from a community member who was willing to loan us on a really high interest rate. And we knew we couldn't live at the spot that we're at right now, which we came back to after things didn't work. We just had to get a place that would meet all the requirements for the zonings and all that in order to play in the rec game. And so we did, and we borrowed a lot of money and high interest rate. And we went there and we played the game for 8 seasons, in the legal rec market in Oregon, until we finally decided this wasn't ever going to pan out. We were never going to pay off our mortgage. It was getting worse and worse. And so we just had to pull the ripcord and bail so that we could recover whatever we could from the situation and move on without losing, just based on the market dynamics. And that's really what it was. And also the immaturity of the market. So, but in that process, since we were growing from seed, we were breeding, and so it just required a lot of like looking into the scientific aspects of breeding and what that means, at least from a selective traditional breeding, not like this modern stuff that CRISPR stuff and all that, but more just selections and also just understanding inbred lines and the truth is like you go on this journey to understand inbred lines, polyhybrids, F1s, and first of all, you realize that the cannabis community is a little behind on understanding kind of the truth of how to even call your variety whatever it is. I mean, but regardless, I ended up seeing the value in the F1 because I was growing from seed in fields, and so I really explored working on inbred lines so I could make F1. So I just did multi-generation processes with filial generation breeding until things were stable enough for me to feel like, oh, this coffee is always looking like this, so I'm going to use that as one of the inbred line parents, and I'm going to match it to something quite a bit different in its nature to it, and put another inbred line parent into the mix, and make sure that those generations or that filial work had been done through a narrowing process, which is inbreeding or narrowing amount of pollen being allowed, basically one male, one female, to increase uniformity in the offspring. But if you do that with the two inbred lines that are actually pretty true breeding, you do get a uniform outcome, F1 generation. And at its finest, which we see in agriculture all over, if you open up a catalog and want to buy some seeds, so much of it is F1, because that is what is going to appease or please the farmers or the gardeners the most, because you get the vigor of the heterozygosity, and you get the uniformity. And so, and also you kind of like, from a seed making standpoint, F1's really attractive because people can't really breed as reliable with the F1. It's not the reliable breeding stock that you would want to utilize. And so it works for a seed maker too, because then the seed maker can hold the inbred lines and make the F1s and release the F1s, and people can't recreate the same thing because they're using F1s as breeding. And that kind of ruins the outcome of the uniformity. If uniformity is what you're looking for, then that's F1 is definitely the way to go. But somehow the cannabis community oftentimes likes to think that an F1 is the super mixed up and there's all kinds of outcomes, and done right, it's not the case. If you make F1s with polyhybrids, which is actually not an F1, you're just making polyhybrids. So if you're just crossing something to a cool clone cut you got and calling it an F1, you're actually making a really, multi-pheno expressing offspring, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that if you're going to then make selections to clone again. But if you're running things from seed in the field, you just have to be conscious of how to create that uniformity in seed form. And you can have uniform inbred lines, but it's not the obvious choice, because if you run inbred lines long enough, you start to recognize that there is a little less something to them. And they can breed better offspring than they are themselves if it's done right. Usually the numbers tend to go down with the filial generations, and there is this inbred line or inbred depression. And so just being aware of all these things is, we were endeavoring in this on the mountain, learning about that just through personal experience and through growing F1s that we were making, and also polyhybrids, and also making selections and doing an incredible amount of work that I probably don't have the energy to do the same amount. I've lost some gusto for trying to appease the market. And so, but I have a ton of that work already saved up in the vault. So it's easy for me to kind of like jump into it if I want, in that way, to create that uniform F1 stock or but then I also realized it's not like everything I call the true F1 even turned out exactly like an F1 would. We're still pretty immature in our even us, as people who've been breeding for a long time, still pretty immature in the process. You recognize that in agriculture, people they don't run 100 plants to make selections on. They run an insane amount of plants, and yeah, you gotta run an insane amount. So they advance the potential really quickly through populations. And so populations give you selections. If you have something that is not expressing uniformly, you're gonna have to open up populations, clump together phenotypes, breed phenotypes to the same phenotypes in order to strengthen the uniformity. And then once the uniformity is more reliable, you can start utilizing that as breeding stock. That can take 2 generations, that can take 10 generations. From a large scale agricultural standpoint, it takes more than 10 generations. You kind of got to do it for a while, but it doesn't mean it can't be done in a shorter time. So, ultimately, the background of Green Source Gardens is we produced flower for the market for a long time, outdoor grown. We didn't use lights to trick things. We didn't use extra light. We actually just really focused on the stuff that was grown straight outdoors, and found it to be of higher quality and better resin and all that. So we were an operating business in the OLCC for a long time, and I learned a lot, and I wouldn't change things. It was a hard, stressful time of awakening, and it ultimately just led us back into the spirit of it all, and that's where we started, and that's where we'll finish, regardless of what Green Source Gardens is actually doing at the moment. We're always engaged in the process of evolving ourselves, the plants, our families, our gardens, and so we just are open to evolution, and we understand the need to evolve right now more than ever. So we're just trying to evolve, and that doesn't mean doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. That just means it looks different. Evolution and things changing look different, so we try to keep things looking different, and I don't subscribe to uniformity, though I know how to utilize uniformity, but it's not my cup of tea in terms of my own personal preference. But like you said, Marcus, if we're going to do this thing and reach as many people as possible, we just have to at least be aware of it all and not be stuck on our own personal thing. It's not what I want is what everybody else needs or wants, but we certainly want to hear people's perspectives and experiences in the process so that we can challenge ourselves to evolve more. But in terms of introduction, that's one way to introduce us, I guess. You were talking breeding, so I kind of went in the breeding slant realm, but yeah.
No, I'm sure Chimera was biting his lip the whole time. I feel like as you were, we've kind of got, the person that I feel like at this point in time has some of the deepest knowledge in regards to breeding cannabis is Ryan Lee, who's in the room right now, Chimera. So he got to listen to that. It was beautifully well put, man. I appreciate what you guys are doing at Green Source Gardens, and it's of course when it comes to following. You start as this sort of cool idea, this concept. A lot of us were activists. We were fighting for the rights of cannabis to be even allowed. Forget about, where we are today. I don't think 25 to 30 years ago, a lot of us even would ever have thought we could get to where we are today, even though now we spend so much time complaining about how it is. I'm just happy people aren't getting their doors kicked down as often and getting guns put in their face and getting arrested by the police and having their properties and children taken and their dogs shot. All the horrific stories that used to sort of follow cannabis and cannabis growing around. And now we have this opportunity that, everyone can play to a degree if you want to get your license, if you want to jump in. And, when you go down that pathway, and I've seen it with big companies, they look at things a very specific way. It's all about, can we make sure this is so consistent that we always get exactly the same thing? And I'm not just talking about like the grow, I'm talking about right into the processing, the extracts, the packaging, just this impossible, almost mental illness type of organization, and everything has to stay the same and everything. It would be neat to
You
see
know
a
what?
product that existed. Oh, sorry, did someone want to say something?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's
Well, you
just
can
that they
cut me
want to
off, brother.
widgetize it. It's part of that like consume like what do they call it? CPG, the consumer packaged goods, right? Mentality where it's like you have to boil everything down so that it's like exactly the same. And I think the consumer is partly to blame. I'm not going to blame the consumer, but I mean it's just a result of the way of our market look what our market looks like, right? That expectation of the consumer of everything being the same. And we've ended up in this legalization after 50 plus 75 years really of this serious prohibition, where in all these other agricultural crops like corn or wheat, there's all this development and uniformity and real breeding going on by scientists. And instead, like you said, you flip your switch on sounding like, probably like the absolute peak of the cannabis gold rush, 2016 to 2018, and you've been trying to run a business since then, also cobbling together your own cultivars, right? Your own varieties. And like that's a huge demand um for a farm of your size. It's like, and I'm not saying you're doing it wrong. I'm just saying it's unrealistic that one organization would be able to do all that.
It's true.
Um, and again, it's not a reflection of you. It's just a reflection of where the industry's been over the last 75 to 100 years. Um, because during all those years of prohibition, where all these other crops were being subject to real breeding and development by scientists all over the world, cannabis was, kind of left in the hands of these renegades, us renegades, um, that didn't, in many cases, didn't really know what we were doing. And we're trying to figure it out. And we're also, conserving the germplasm of a species while the UN and the United States through the DEA is running around all over the world trying to suppress these cannabis cultures from Thailand to Morocco to, everywhere. And yeah, like it kind of makes sense that we are where we're at the end of the road that we traveled, right? And so it's really hard when you want to take this kind of ethical or ideologically driven mandate like you're taking on, like, hey, we're going to go out to the field and do it all from seed and fuck uniformity and try to do it all your way. It's a lot. It's really hard to do. And in many places, as much as we have like all this development in quality hash making technology and extraction and all the edibles and all these new products, the vape pens and all the stuff that we've got that are kind of new in the last 20 years, the breeding hasn't really caught up. Um, and I kind of feel like, I've done a lot of breeding, a lot of different types of breeding, and I kind of feel like there's all these different ways of going about doing it. And again, it's a lot of it's driven by ideology. Like an open pollination is about preservation. It's not about refinement and development. It's about keeping everything. And it's really about, hey, let's keep everything so that we have everything to work with in the future. The exact opposite is that real tight inbreeding or even selfing, where you're trying to maybe take something that you have, like a phenotype that you have, and lock that down into a seed line so that you can commercialize it. It just means you have customers, right? So that a customer, when they buy the thing that you're selling them, all the plants come up looking the same. And then there's this other type of breeding, which is really about hybridization and creating with the intent of discovering and creating something new. Um, and those are all really like three different, very, very different goals, and they're all relevant in their own way, but they're all very different. And the processes you're going to take to get to those end goals is all different. And it's hard to do it. It's again, it's kind of that jack of all trades, master of none. It's like you really got to pick which avenue you're going to go down. Because each one of those kind of subheadings of what breeding could be is really like it's monstrous, and you could fill your whole life with it. Right. So yeah, it's good to hear you talking about that, because these are definitely really the issues that we're facing today as an industry.
Yeah. And like the place that I've kind of come to it is like I've just realized there's so many different ways to like further the genetics. Um, one person can be saying this is an F4, and another person can say this is an F4, and depending on how they got to that fourth generation, could the outcome could be so different. It could be very stable. It could be very unstable in terms of phenotypic expression. Um, and
Yeah,
so,
well, I just did an episode of the Breeders Cast with these guys from Washington. They have a podcast. It's all really kind of more nerdy for specifically for breeders, and that really was kind of one of the points, right? It's like a lot of people see these F4, F3, F5 as like, you just have to do a certain number of crosses, and then you get that goal, and you get to have that little merit badge that says F5 that you can sew on your blazer, right? And it's like it doesn't really mean anything. F2, F3 is just about trying to give you an idea of what the level of uniformity or segregation of genetics is going to be happening at the particular, that particular generation. It's really about the breeder giving information to the grower so that they know what to expect.
mhm.
Um, but people kind of feel like, hey, I got to F4, now you cross the finish line, right? Like you can get down to F4 and still be in totally the wrong place and have to go back to the F1 generation. Like it's not really like, oh, you crossed a line and now you're done just because you got to F4, right? But I think to a certain degree, a lot of the community uses it that way. You can, sometimes like if I make an F1 cross and then you make, your F2 or yourselves from your F1 generation, you might want to grow like 10, 15, 20 different families from that one generation before you even identify which of the lines you're going to continue down. Right. And I don't think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people say, oh, I made my F1 and then I made my F2 and now I'm at F3. It's like sometimes you get to F3 and the only thing that you've learned is that you have to go back to F2. Right. But people they're like, oh, we'll just go on from F3 and hopefully we can fix it by F4. It's like, no, you're just going farther down the wrong road. Right. So,
Yeah, I think
um,
I think the biggest mistake that people are making in their inbred line work is population size. So it's like there's a narrowing point where you have to reduce the population to create the characteristic expression that you're looking for. But then once you've done that, you have to open the population back up in order to retain as much genetic diversity that is possible within that expression so that you have some kind of reliability down the run. If you want to keep making F generations on something that's stable, you have to start opening up populations to do larger more males, more females, to capture more of the already narrow gene pool that's been created. So, we're trying to keep as you go further down. And that's why bigger agriculture has always done such a much better job, because they've been able to isolate phenotypes instead of single plants. And then they can run a whole bunch of one that looks the same with the trait that they're looking for. And then they can breed with all of those, with all the other types out of the picture. And they still have 1,000 of those. And so the genetic diversity within the line is still bigger, and so therefore it's easier to work with an inbred line that's been made with larger populations versus somebody who's just thinking they've got to keep selecting one male, one female, and they're at F7, F8, and they're wondering why all their plants are so dudding out or not growing very vigorously to start. And sure, you might get some out of your offspring that start to grow better. But in general, these inbred lines are a little more picky, and you know, especially if the populations have been so reduced to single parent female, single male for too long. It just wipes out the potential, I feel like. Though I think you could take something that's been pretty wiped out and cross it and find renew some vigor within that and see that work. Sometimes I wonder about inbred lines that aren't performing very well still making better breeders than polyhybrids, because you're putting that genetic up against a brand new thing. So it's this whole new thing that's created. So even if the parent was really weak, it might create a really strong offspring. There's no that's how it is or that's how it's not. It's unique to every situation. But that's kind of where I see people making a lot of mistakes, is this continued narrowing through too many generations versus doing a good job F2, F3 to get what you want, and then start increasing populations of that line to preserve that expression, I guess. And also to preserve the genetic diversity so that you can make good selections for vigor within the inbred line that keeps it going. But I'm not a scientific breeder, like I make observations and stuff. So I do some science while I'm doing it, but I'm not like, I didn't go to the schools and I didn't engage in the labs, and it's not necessarily my desire. At this point, I've learned what I feel like. I feel like we all have the capacity to learn whatever we choose to learn, because we have access to so much information that can sometimes bite us in the butt, because we think what we're reading is truth, and then realize that actually there's a million different ways that all this can go. So you can't really take any information that you're getting from the internet or from any place and call it 100%, because there's more at play in our world than what we see. And so that little piece, and we could call that spirituality, we could call it the unseen worlds, and that piece is the piece that will never be fully understood by scientific methods. So, we can pursue scientific methods and get to a really far place with it. But, if you're talking about things that you can only see and create experiments with, and you're missing out maybe on a large percentage of what even actually exists, which is the spirit side.
Green Source, love and respect. I mean, I think I often talk a lot about that the diversity is the ruler, and you've been showing a lot of how you're broadcasting. You're letting the plant decide, you're letting the environment decide what gets furthered. You're showing what is strong early. You're referencing that it's not this science, it's not this understanding of you that's creating the deliciousness that is coming out of your garden. It's this unseen, it's the earth is doing it. And I hopped on because I saw you were here. A lot of my passion is coming out of a coffee that we met at the Regenerative Conference a few years back, and you shared some coffee with me, and this has been such a blessing to our area. And very much the diversity of what I had going on is what improved it. And it wasn't something that I did. So I really like that you're bringing attention to, it's not some preconceived notion that you have, but it's the diversity. It's you maybe preparing to allow your area and what exists on your piece of the pie, piece of the earth to infulge. And yeah, I very much like that, and wanted to hop on and thank you and ask if you wanted to talk about the coffee specifically. For me, it was a skunky sweetness that was very evocative of the head. referenced this unseen power that we're maybe attracted to. And it was a big improvement. Just wanted to share some love and respect and thanks for you furthering these flavors.
Right on. I appreciate that. And it's always nice to hear. And I'll speak to the coffee. I can talk about the coffee because it was one of the most, uniform things that I kind of got a hold of. And it was a little bit, there was some different expressions when I first got it at F2 or F3 from Kaya. I can't even remember what that F generation was. I took that and I grew it actually in a gulch, kind of like didn't give it that much of the, the loamy, greasy, fatty soil that makes things big and luscious, but put it in a gulch area in a breeding, for breeding. Sometimes I've found that if I can breed things in stressful environments, I can't necessarily look at the plant and tell you what it's going to look like when you bring it out into full sun in the loam. But what does come through in those situations are kind of like the nose, and the flowers generally not a good thing to judge when it's not done in the full sun expression, because it's probably morphologically changed a little bit because there's less light in the gulches and there's less, so it's a little looser. It's hard to say this is going to be a killer commercial thing when you're doing things in those other environments. But when you do that in the other environments, you obviously expose the population that you're doing that with to the stressors of the less than desirable place. And those that which survive in the less than desirable place deserve a place out in the desirable place at some point. So you look at the offspring then of that which was bred in those stressful places, and you put them out in the full sun and you start to look at what happens then. And then you can kind of gauge what this is going to do when it's done well, I guess. Because the other thing about ganja, and I call it ganja, that's just kind of my name for it. I think it's important to acknowledge kind of the ancient realms of where this entity and spirit came from. But where was I headed with that? We're talking coffee, bring it back out into the field, look at its full potential in that realm. But even in that realm, people grow so differently that the morphology of a plant can change so much based on the nutrient supply. And so, you run into this thing with the normal weed growers where they're all buying these bagged amendments and they're all subscribing to everything from the mycorrhizal inoculation to the high nitrogen during vegetative growth to the high phosphorus during flower to the crazy insane amounts of molasses that people people are just going crazy trying to think they're going to create the best thing in the whole world. And I think we have to deprogram ourselves from our American culture of big and bad and good, and we have to reorient ourselves to the worlds of the unseen, the things, the spirit that drives and forms our bodies, and not necessarily the actual componentry of the physical world, but rather the mysteriousness of the things that have designed this physical world. And so you give people the same seed and you tell them all to grow it, and they don't all end up with the same thing, even just because of the way they practice growing. And so many people are just shooting so much powder at these things that, like you can turn something that I grow and looks this way into something way leafier and way looser and way bigger and way fluffier because there's so much nutrient availability that people like to put in their plants. They don't finish until super late because they think they want to keep growing. And so getting really honed in on how this plant likes to work, you can realize like you can pick a spot with less light and grow a looser, fluffier bud that has better resin maybe for being able to capture, or you throw it in the full sun and maybe starve it of some nutrients at the end and see a tighter, more less leafy bud that might cater better to an smoking flower or whatever.
That's right. That
uh,
larvae bud may be littered with resin, which is maybe what we're after. You touched on so many things in that short uh, speech there, and it was the throwing the powder at it, or what the thing that we think that we're doing, and what is actually available to the plant. In the same way that some people will eat vitamins that maybe don't even become uptaken by the body, and they just pass through. And the word of the ganja and God's garden and Ganjalier, you are very much sound like a Ganjalier, a steward, where you're presenting an environment where the spirit can do its thing. And this is church, and it's great to see everyone. And pardon me for also recognizing and loving that there's this spirit that is infulging something with the sun.
Dude, I saw the spirit on your face while it's Nick, right?
Yeah.
Yes. While Nick was talking, I saw the spirit on your face, Adam. The smile that you were looking at while he was talking was how I felt. So thank you, brother, for coming on and sharing all of that. I'm going to do a short interruption, which will be to go down. I like to play around with ChatGPT and Grok. And so when he said ganja, I was like, oh, I wonder what Grok would tell me is the definition of ganja. And it kind of made me chuckle. So I was going to share it with you guys. The term ganja, also spelled ganja, so the term ganja, G-A-N-G-J-A-H, also spelled G-A-N-J-A, refers to a term of Sanskrit and Hindi origin commonly used to describe cannabis or marijuana, particularly in the context of its flowers or resinous buds used for smoking or medicinal purposes. It is deeply rooted in cultural, spiritual, and medicinal contexts, especially in regions like India, Jamaica, and among Rastafarian communities around the world. The etymology and cultural context, origin derived from the Sanskrit word ganja, referring to the cannabis plant or its psychoactive preparations. The term was adopted into Hindi and other Indian languages. Usage in India, in ancient Indian texts like the Atharvaveda, cannabis referred to as bhang or ganja is considered a sacred plant with medicinal and spiritual properties, often used in Ayurvedic medicine and religious rituals. Rastafarian and Jamaican cultures. In Jamaica, ganja is a colloquial term for marijuana embraced by Rastafarians as a sacramental herb that aids meditation, spiritual connection, and healing. Its use is often tied to resistance against oppression and colonial systems. Modern usage. Globally, ganja is a slang term for high-quality cannabis, often associated with potential strains or the cultural legacy. Sorry, Chimera. It doesn't know yet. Additional notes. This one got me laughing. The term is sometimes used in brand names, strain names, Ganja White Night or Soma seed strains, or cultural references in music, literature, and cannabis communities like Hash Church.
Wow, let's take it back. At least it got the last part right, but what a word salad.
Dude, but I only read the word salad to get to the last part.
I know.
Thought it was so
At least
funny.
you got the last part right.
Anyway, back to our conversation.
Gan is the Hebrew or ancient word for garden. Jah is God. I love thinking of it as of God's garden. A Ganjalier is a steward of God's garden. I think ganja refers to all of the medicine that comes from God's garden and not just the herb. But I love taking it back. I think we as a community very much can start to tell the AI what ganja means. Believe the hash eater of what hash is.
True story, absolutely.
Great to see everyone. Wow, Green Source. Love and respect for what you're doing up there. I often, somewhat our gardens may be linked definitely with the genetic, but it seems to have the same protected vibe where it's
so the coffee. Tell me about the coffee. I got some seeds from Kaya of the Kaya's coffee, but what's the historic lineage to the coffee? Like the best that we can put together.
It comes directly from Shiva.
Ah, that's
to me the flavor was, as we discussed, a sweet skunk, and the head and the body and the time, the potency, again, the potency of and powerfulness, what I would describe as maybe one of the most evocative and powerful medicines that in 20 years I've come across, made it so preferable and delicious. And it wasn't forward with the gassy skunk or the off-putting, what Dr. Mark described to us last week as like maybe the methyl ring part of the skunk, but the other compound, uh yeah, to me it's one of the most fun and pleasurable medicines. And I mean, I I don't know if other people are finding it this interesting, but for me, it was like it wasn't the roadkill version of skunk. It was very much, yeah, had a sweetness to it. So, and maybe pushed with a little caryophyllene. Um, but give
Well,
thanks to Chip.
when I started with it, I saw a couple of different expressions in terms of the smell. And there was one that had a more muted smell, which is obviously the hasher. It just always is the case. The loudest things are usually not hashers. It's just the nature of how oily resin works. It's super volatile, and waxy resin is not. And so, I ended up making selections for the most volatile components, the oily. So I wasn't making hash necessarily at that time. So it wasn't something I was focusing on hash with. I was focusing on it from a standpoint of what is the loudest thing that is coming out of this line and making those selections. The plant itself is obviously Afghani by nature. We talk about where does it come from? All ganja comes from Shiva. And I'm surprised the AI doesn't even talk about Shiva in that whole expression through the term ganja. But AI's always got something really wrong and a bunch of really cool right stuff, but it's always missing the point on something. I mean,
the unseen. It misses the unseen.
Yeah. So, but the coffee, I selected away from the hashing side of things. So the coffee's coming out of my garden. Now we're F5, F6, F7. We're all really loud, oily. You touch it with your hand and it's basically a solvent that, if you had waxy trichomes on your finger and you touched coffee, it would melt it. So
very thin skinned, melt away.
Yeah, good luck trying to catch that in a bag. That stuff turns into it just goes into the water, and great water to drink. But pretty low yields on hash and not very high quality because there's not enough fats and lipids there to give it to collect it. So in some ways it's really special in that way. It's been confusing, I think, for people because coffee originally was kind of like sought after hash line. And so, and I think there certainly was that involved in it. But again, you take one variety and you give it to 5 different people, and depending on what they're selecting for, you end up with something different. So, if you,
Well, it's because it's not a variety.
yeah, it's not a full, yeah, especially in ganja or in cannabis, whatever you want to call it. It's not a varietal. But it is of that sacred nature. And so it has everything in there to become a variety. It just needs some work if you want to go in the direction of appeasing the brain and intellect side of physical humans right now. Otherwise, less judgment on things is, the lens you put on when you engage in your relationship to ganja is going to play a big role in the outcome. And if you are constantly walking around judging your plants for what's good about them and what's bad about them, you're going down a path that's taking you further away from the spirit side and bringing you further into the material side. And if you're not incorporating there's this thing, it's called
I mean, that even to say that is a highly judgmental thing,
yeah.
Let's talk
right?
about the ego and hubris and again, the grower knowing what we know what's best. I think where our culture is very ripe with us assuming, giving credence to an outside expert that maybe doesn't have the best interest of the patient in mind. And I've talked before about the mountain, the temperature. These are metrics that we can attempt to control. But for me, what has pushed forward the most healthy and evocative and tasty and good experience is beyond everything that I can do and anything that anyone else can do, of going and getting a product. And it is all from the diversity that exists here, and that literally pushing to the place that I've prepared, pushing and overtaking the diversity that I've tried to stimulate. And the forest will, and you talk about plant in the gulch, and you have very much the area is going to attempt to overtake, and your job is to kind of present an area or steward a small portion of that. And so yeah, just that I think it is the ego of the grower, or knowing you're the best. And really, to me, it is in removing a lot of that attention, feeding quite literally the life around the plant, so that there is a life cycle, so that there is a life and death that feeds into the root. And just even recognizing that, where you're not feeding the plant, you're feeding the organisms that surround the family that's around the plant.
Yeah.
And just a final cool idea from my arborist experience, the trees themselves are feeding some of their sugars that they produce and some of their life energy out through their roots to the community, so that there can be life and death. And it might be something like 60% of their life force is going to that which is around them. And and I don't know how you metric that, but that is stunning, that the individual is feeding the thousands that live in their neighborhood, so that there can be a healthy environment that they can then benefit from. Take care of your neighbors. Holy cow.
That's why the trees were always happy, happy little trees. Sequestering carbon from one another.
Yeah, I used to say it all the time, back to what you were saying, Adam, is, people always want to like, look at my garden, and then you go to their garden and they're so excited about it and they're so happy about it. And sure, you look at the ganja and they're certainly taking care of that, but I've always said, if you really want your ganja to thrive, you have to take care of everything else besides the ganja, because the ganja doesn't necessarily it's not just, it's not all about the ganja. The ganja's here because of everything else. And so there's another piece of all this that's really important to recognize is I was talking about this vesica idea where say two things overlap. Think about it in ecology. It's like there's an ecotone, and then there's an ecology, and there's an overlap where that happens. And in that overlap, more exists than anywhere else. And so the center road, the middle ground, is the most potential. Gardens are an overlap of humanity and nature, and not that humanity separate from nature, but the potential of nature with human consciousness involved is greater than without it. And so, a lot of people think humans are parasites to the planet. In a lot of cases, they are, depending on the lens that the human's looking through and how they participate. But if you understand that when you're designing or creating a garden, that it's a relationship between the other side and not a dominance. you know, because one person wants to build a garden, they say, I want it to be square, and they don't even take into account the slope and the way things are. They just think it's going to be like, I want it to be straight line square because it's easy to put irrigation down, it's easy to amend, it's easy to do this and that, and they destroy everything in their area as if they're at war. Well, the opposite of that is to engage and invite everything in the area as information that you gather to implement something that's going to work for both. And when you have that lens on, you're trying to establish connections versus separation. And, you know, to me, spirit and science, they're important things that overlap, and there's a vesica between the two, but you can't negate one or the other and expect to come out in the heavenly holy lands. You have to engage in both and not be adamantly opposed to one or the other. And I think a lot of people think I'm opposed to science and all this stuff. It's like, no, we all do science. It's just the funny thing about science is science thinks they know it all. And you know, that's the piece of it that I just think is kind of funny. It's like,
it is science, and using the proper language, and it's not.
I got to totally object to what you're saying there. Science,
I mean,
science says we don't know anything, and everything that we state is open to question. So if you think that science says you know it all, then you actually
right.
don't
I think you're absolutely right. But I think in general, on the grand scheme of modern humans, you know, when you hear people say science says this, well, they never take into account the pieces that are missing, because a lot of the science that's presented to us is funded science, and I don't trust things that are funded and looking for certain results and then paying people to do experiments to come up with answers that fit the narrative that they're trying to create. And so in the modern world, I don't think.
Well, listen, I'm a scientist. I've never been paid once to come up with a finding, ever.
No, he's talking about the majority of mainstream scientists. You, Chimera, are unique in the aspect that you just speak the fucking truth. Like right now, what you just said about science. Well, yeah, that is what science is. That's not the interpretation of 90% of society on what science is. They are totally not thinking the way you, an actual fucking scientist who does not take money to cloud his views into a perspective that they want the population to perceive. And that's,
Mark is a scientist too. I think that science is a way of looking at the world.
It is.
Right?
We're testing hypothesis.
It's a
method.
It's a method for testing knowledge.
I want to be a scientist when I grow up.
When we see, I think the science is showing us that that the idea of one love, or the oneness, or the interconnectedness, or the spirit being connected to the inputs in the environment, to the fact that when you have, the science of modern agriculture, of having a wasteland desert that all the topsoil has been removed from, and where the only green thing is the piece of broccoli or the thing. And so you create an environment where any pests that wouldn't really be pests if there was an actual garden that existed, that you create this situation where you're going to say, oh, now science is telling us we need to apply these pesticides and toxins to the environment. And so our not recognition that this, the Garden of Eden means, the Gan Eden means fertile garden. And so us, with our modern science, practicing monoculture, practicing lack of diversity, practicing application.
Again, I think that's an industry using the word science in a way that's not really what it is.
Well, very much we're in practice of putting things on the food and the medicine that make it into our children's stomachs. So making
it's even been it's only in the last 30 years that we're starting to even have acceptance of medical cannabis, right? Like Prop 215 was 1995. So sure. Yeah, if you consider like the 90s and the 80s and certainly the 70s, there was this mass prohibition of information from a bunch of prohibitionists that were trying to create a narrative of the world, right? So that they could manipulate people into staying away from things like cannabis because cannabis might free your mind, and that was far too dangerous for society, right? And so when you consider, like, forget science, when you consider that we come from a culture that is so like wrought with control and fear that people are afraid of having of others having access to a plant, right? Like that's a sick society, right? And of course, a lot of these practices of society, like, the way that we've been doing agriculture, this mass monoculture for 40 years. Um, I don't look at those things as science, right? I think
But
that
yeah,
those are people that
bad
are,
science,
and
maybe.
just like there's a lot of people that are, truly spiritual, but they're manipulating what might be of religion, right? It's like there's a lot of frauds that use these words in ways that they're not really the way we're talking about it. But to me, I don't see anything negative about science. I think there's negative things about industry. But for me, science is really a way of looking at the world. It's a tool to investigate whether something is true or not.
the
Um,
sickness and the fear is coming out of the practice of us not of our lack of recognition of the connection between the life in the soil, our children's the life in our children's stomachs, and the fear, the things that keep us in a empathetic, outward thinking, non-self-centered, non-fearful state, our healthy gut biome. That comes from us not offending our medicine and our food with fungicides that even the organic kale has all over it in California. And so just this idea that, like, okay, not science, but really connecting the buffer, that our digestion starts at the roots of the food, not necessarily in our stomachs. And I like this idea of us pushing against what we've done, what our forefathers have done, back into, hey, let's recognize taking care of the field outside that surrounds our children's schools will benefit the the adults that they grow into. And yeah, I
I think
really,
it's the air as well, Adam.
of
Did
course.
have you ever seen if there's a KRS video where he talks about he's saying, this right here around us, this we think it's air, but it's not air. And he says he realized that if he stops and he closes his nose and his mouth for 4 minutes, that he's separated from this substance for 4 minutes, that his heart doesn't stop, his brain doesn't stop, his body functions don't stop, but the thing that he loses immediately is consciousness. And so he had this revelation that he wasn't breathing in air, he was breathing in consciousness. And so to also pollute and contaminate the consciousness of the air, and I see you laughing, Mark, but plug your nose for 4 minutes and see if any of those things that I just said are true or not. You will absolutely lose consciousness.
O2 is the sweet hallucinatory compound that is enabling this consciousness. Oxygen is the great hallucinator that is allowing us to be here today and to interact. And yeah, I do think the biplanes that are dusting the fields and the guys in the hazmat ET suits in Napa spraying the grapes in the middle of the night, I think all of this is offensive, and we should be moving the other direction. Mark, what do you think about all this?
He's laughing his head off.
Well, no, I mean, it's,
I
Dr.
appreciate your perspective.
Scaldone.
I mean, all the chatter about science, I don't want to piss off any MAGA people in the chat, but, well, I'll tell you what, let me can that conversation for now. I want to go back to something that you had said, Adam, which is about, the trees exuding sugar and, doing things down in the soil. So you got to remember trees are plants, right? And plants don't fixed nitrogen from the air, right? So 79% of that mixture we call air, right, is nitrogen gas, N2, which is pretty inert. And it's difficult to make it into soluble nitrogen, but microbes and fungi and insects have been around for millennia, and they figured out how to fix nitrogen. And so nitrogen is important for plants because nitrogen is just an essential element in things called amino acids, which is what proteins are made of. DNA is rich with nitrogen. There's nitrogen all throughout biology, right? And so you need soluble nitrogen, and nitrogen that's in the air around us, it's just N2, right? Diatomic nitrogen is super unreactive. But these bugs have evolved these enzymes, which are these metal-centered proteins that coordinate diatomic nitrogen and do what it takes a chemist in a lab and caustic reagents and high pressure and all kinds of shit. I mean, I could react nitrogen in the lab. In fact, I've one thing I used to have in my lab was something called a dry box. And what we actually do in the dry box, it's like that thing you see Homer Simpson have at the nuclear plant, with the big rubber gloves and everything, and you could get in the rubber gloves and work on stuff inside the dry box. Well, we flush the dry box with nitrogen to keep it good and inert. And one time I didn't realize this, but nitrogen reacts with lithium wire, and it makes a really pretty fire. It's like a cherry red, really ruby red colored flame that I've never seen before. So you can react nitrogen with stuff. Lithium itself is super reactive, like metallic sodium. It's going to react immediately with water, generate an exothermic reaction, and start a fire right away. But yeah, so bugs like insects have figured out how to fix nitrogen. And so that's a really important symbiotic relationship between plants and what's going on in the soil, because the plants need nitrogen. Without any nitrogen, you don't have proteins, you don't have DNA, you don't have pigments, you don't have all the things. All the biochemical machinery is based on carbon and nitrogen. There's plenty of carbon, right? So we know where carbon comes from, right? You were talking about oxygen, right? So we get oxygen from plants through photosynthesis and exchange when we talk and when we breathe out and when we fart. We send a lot of CO2 into the environment. And so the plant takes CO2 through photosynthesis and turns it into soluble sugar. And then sugar gets polymerized into something called cellulose, which is basically what paper and trees are made out of. Another biochemical pathway is the sugar is converted into something called lignin, right? Which is the other stuff inside trees and woody biomass, right? So the lignin is kind of like the glue that holds the sheets of cellulose together, right? And the whole paper making process has to do with delignifying
that's a
cellulose,
nightmare, dude.
which
We have a paper and pulp plant up the way here, and it's not a good scene, dude.
I bet you it smells like rotten eggs, right?
Also, the whiskey,
sulfur, right?
The extract of whiskey is the crinoline converting to vanillin via alcohol extraction of the barrel. I think there are
there's all kinds of chemistry like that happens.
But and maybe there's also, to me, there is a patient's access to nitrogen via, as I understand it, the plant uptaking nitrogen, going through its cycle, returning to the earth or the compost pile. And in that way, is it not refixing, this idea of is it not fixing the nitrogen into the soil when the plant in the fall drops its leaves? And is that
there's an economy of atoms there that's happening. Like, Mother Nature doesn't waste anything. Matter's neither created nor destroyed, right? Except inside nuclear fission reactors and stuff. But
Dabs sure are.
Mother Nature's cycle outdoors is, the reason why we're not, up to our elbows in rotten wood from trees that have fallen in centuries past, is because there's fungi and insects like termites that eat wood, right? And so, yeah, they eat wood. As it turns out, termites actually can't digest cellulose. They rely on a bacteria in their gut that's able to basically depolymerize cellulose and turn it into sugar, right? So, yeah, I mean, time course of evolution in terms of like what's evolved on planet Earth takes advantage of, if there's a feedstock that's being given off by one species, it's absorbed by another species, right? And until, like, when you look at like the dead carcass of animals out on the prairie that have completely been stripped of anything edible, and it turns into basically minerals, right? It's just the bones and the skeleton that's left, and basically that gets mineralized and turned into soil again. So yeah, so nothing goes away.
The animal is a part of this cycle. We need that
Yeah,
manure. We need
absolutely.
we need those
Absolutely.
enzymes in the
And maybe
animals.
and maybe the purpose of humans, so humans have done a lot of interesting stuff on planet Earth since we've been here for the last couple hundred
The
thousand years,
Haber
right?
method, the Haber method, and us grabbing the nitrogen and feeding it to the plant instead of this,
Well,
again,
yeah,
your lab and the gloves and needing the isolation and
yeah,
all of this stuff isn't not cool. But to me, the coolness does exist in the green that is in the surrounding garden. Even the weeds, the things that are less preferable, these things know how to take what is in the soil, uplift it, grab the nitrogen from the air, localize it, compost it, mix it with the carbon. The bacterias are doing their digestion, and that is presenting the diet to the local plants exactly what it needs. And so it's a bit of this Haber, go get the nitrogen from somewhere else, feed it in there. That it is another way to do it. But
I always feel like, as much as we think we know about these intelligences, these fungi and plant intelligences, we are not perceiving even close to the full picture of what is going on. And so this becomes a bit of, this is where science does freak me out a little bit, where it's kind of like where we perceive a small amount and then we base our observations on our perceptions, what we perceived, we base our whole thing on that. But it's like, what if the rabbit hole continues to go deeper and deeper and deeper as we become more aware through, I guess, more advanced prosthetics, i.e., machinery and equipment that allows our senses to perceive on planes that we, like when Dr. Mark is using a proton NMR, that's a fucking prosthetic, dude. Like, that is not just some machine. To me, that is a human prosthetic that for our senses, that allows him to perceive things down to the billionth. But only in the particular way that piece of machinery is built. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about it. I think that I'm definitely a fan of science and what science can do. I definitely see that everything is a double-edged sword. And so obviously, people, how could science be a double-edged sword? It's like, well,
well,
remember when they split the atom?
something that we ought to talk about, because and again, I don't want to get political, but I'll stop by just saying elections do matter, and the leadership of our country right now has taken very draconian measures to basically really decimate the United States leadership position in the world as an innovator around biomedical sciences and natural sciences like astronomy and chemistry and physics. And just recently, the other day in the New York Times, a story came out saying that RFK's budget now is calling for the elimination of a institute. So let me talk about the National Institutes of Health for a second. So National Institutes of Health are a bunch of institutes that all fall under an umbrella that's funded by the Health and Human Services uh, uh, organization, which is led by this RFK guy. Okay. I think putting RFK in that position, this is way over his head. He doesn't know what he's doing. They've stopped cancer research. They've stopped Alzheimer's research. They've basically put a pause on all the stuff that the NIH is currently doing. And that's directly affected me and my job and my funding.
Oh shit.
This basically
Your funding.
money. This takes money out of my pocket, Marcus.
But can I say one thing without you being potentially triggered? Is not the United States literally the most unhealthy country in the world right now, with the most Alzheimer's and the most cancers and the most, like, are these groups doing a good job?
Yeah,
or
are we being efficacious with what we're spending?
Do these groups maybe need to lose some of their funding? Like,
Who
what
is
the
doing-
fuck have they been doing for the last 25 years that your numbers are climbing at such an accelerated rate? You have the highest Alzheimer's, the highest cancer, the highest obesity. You know, I mean, fuck, dude. I'm just saying from a Canadian perspective. And keep in mind, over here in Canada, we got your Kamala Harris. We didn't get the conservative. We got the super fucking liberal. And they're going to destroy our country too. So don't fall victim to this division mentality, because truly, like I'm telling you, they're both evil. And all I can remember about evil is when Jerry Garcia said, remember, when you choose the lesser of two evils, you're still choosing evil.
Yeah, but
Who
you're
is
taking
doing
that
the
you're taking that
research?
statement out of context like everybody else does, because lesser evil is better than more evil. And let me just get to how this relates
what
to
if I don't have
cannabis,
to
which is
choose
why I'm
either?
bringing this up.
Yes,
So
please.
one of his draconian moves is to basically eliminate the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. This is the institute in the NIH that is studying the medical benefits of cannabis. So basically, there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent, and you can go to their website and you could look at something called the NIH Reporter. And when you look at so this is reporter.nih.gov, and do a key search word on cannabis. And what you'll see is all of the projects that are being funded by the NIH on cannabis. And there's literally thousands of them, right? My project's in there. Okay. So the money that these colleges and universities get not only pay for the research that's being done, but the money that the colleges get are very important for all of the overhead costs, like the janitor and the toilet paper and the flagpole outside and the guy who cuts the lawn out there. I mean, so when those funds are removed, you know, colleges, and you hear about Harvard because Harvard's in the news lately, and schools like Columbia, those are very, very wealthy schools that have very large billion-dollar endowments. My little school, we don't have a billion-dollar endowment, right? And so we rely on this funding to basically not only do our research, but also to pay our salaries. And when that money goes away, guess what happens to our salary? It goes away too. Not cool, right? So I want everybody to go to reporter.nih.gov and do a key search on cannabis. And what you'll see, I'm just going to read the title of some of these studies. Assessing the benefits and harms of cannabis use in patients treated with immunotherapy for cancer, a prospective cohort study. That's 667,000 that goes to the State University of New York at Buffalo, shared by 3 different principal investigators. That's funded by the National Cancer Institute.
What are some of their findings? What did they find out?
I tell you what, there's literally hundreds of projects here. And Adam, you need to do your homework. Go to the web and start reading about it. I'm not going to tell you about it now. You can read about it for yourself.
I just thought you might know.
Okay. No, I'm scrolling through NIH.gov, and you can see there's literally hundreds of projects here. And what you find out
what they're finding
is that the institutes that are funding these, let me read some of these institutes. The National Institute for Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, the National Institutes for General Medical Sciences, the National Institute of Mental Health, the National Institute on Aging, the National Institute for Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, The National Center for Advancing Translational Services. Translational services is a name for moving things through clinical trials. They get billions of dollars to basically try to move drugs through clinical trials. And right now, cannabinoids, including the phytocannabinoids, are in clinical trials. This is the institute in the NIH that pays for that.
But how does a group like this exist in the US when you have the FDA just letting like poisonous like flavor compounds and natural flavors and all these different dyes and just absolutely cantankerous, poisonous products being put into your food? Like from the Canadian perspective, your whole system needs to be ripped down. And don't even
That's
get
what's
me
happening.
started on universities, bro. Universities up here in Canada, because I can't speak down there, are so fucking brainwashed and woke. It's painful to even be exposed to. And I'm telling you, because I had kids go to them. Kids are terrified to share their opinions. They're absolutely fucking terrified. University children are terrified to share their opinions because they'll be canceled in some form or another, even if they just want to maybe discuss something. And it really, really went into overdrive in Canada when they started compelling speech at universities and fining and potentially jailing professors if they didn't compel to and bend the knee to these speeches that they wanted them to, particular words they wanted them to use and say. And then of course when COVID-19 came in, holy Christ, man, I'll tell you, like the majority of young people who got, at least that I spoke to, which was obviously not a huge percentage, they all told me they got this vaccine not because they believed that it would help them with their health, but that they needed to go to parties and bars and be able to go to school and their jobs. And they really like, I just thought, whoa, that's a terrible fucking reason to get the vaccine. You know, at least the people that I met that were like, I'm getting it because I truly believe it'll keep me alive. I was like, okay, well, that seems like rooted in something pretty serious, your mortality. I personally didn't get the vaccine and I'm super fucking stoked that I didn't, as it has played out the way it's played out now. But holy shit, those universities, man, putting pressure on young people and really funneling and directing them to think a very particular way that, in my opinion, is not what I would call overly intelligent. Very limiting. And then, once again, just from my perspective up here in Canada, I'm not anti-university. I know that we have some great universities up here, and that if you want to go for very specific things, that it can be wonderful. But yeah, I definitely, yeah,
Well, again,
Jack
just to
Sprat. Oh, go
to
ahead.
to go back to the science,
Yep.
science and the scientific literature shows that vaccinations work. Okay. And it's a
Right.
public health thing. And it
Yeah.
only works if everyone gets vaccinated. That's how we
Right.
got rid of the measles. Measles
There's
is now
not
back.
one study that
because-
shows that vaccinations are efficacious, and I'll be
Yeah,
interested.
I'm not on
no,
that. I'm
no,
not on that
that's
either.
just
We can
that's
we
just
can
that's
agree to
just
disagree.
bullshit, dude.
We can
I know the
listen, it's not
science here.
vaccine church. We can agree to
Yeah.
disagree. I'm happy to have long conversations with you about this. I respect your opinion. You have to respect mine.
Okay.
And we just got to get back to hash church. And
This is
you know,
true.
'cause
So
this is
guys,
what
can I
happens when we go
here?
down the political sort of divider pathway.
Master Colin.
So back to science. Sorry to interject everyone. Because I was just listening to there's a lot of perspective here, which is awesome, and that's what makes it church. And that's why we're here. Um, what I heard from Mark is that science is really under the gun right now, and
Under
they're
attack.
yeah, under attack. Yeah. So that's a better analogy there. Um, in that, in the United States, we have such a capitalistic environment here that it's very puppet mastery in a way that's controlling a narrative that I don't quite understand. I'll just be the first to maybe say it here amongst the group. I have some thoughts as to maybe what they're doing. But I think that when science is under attack in a capitalistic environment, that there's some things in question. I think efficacy, I think is what I pull from Mark is really the first thing that comes to mind to me is there's no one to check upon industry and the things that they're developing and making, and there's no one to oversee that from a macro lens point of view and say, hey, you can or can't do something, whatever that might be. And in a capitalistic environment, I truly believe that that could lead to bad things. You know, there could lots of forests could be cut down, lots of resources could be depleted, things like that, as low-hanging fruit, as an example. Oceans are not overseen. Um, Wildlife is destroyed. Things like that come to mind. But there's a bigger sensibility, I think, from Dr. Mark that I walk away with from a research point of view. That is really what I think I'm walking away with from you. And that's, you know, that's hard to swallow because the progression, and this is maybe picking up on a scent that you're laying down, maybe the progression is going to be stifled in our industry as a result. Is that fair to say? That we won't
Well,
have the ability to move the policy forward in the name of science? Is that kind of something that we'll pull
so
from this? Or I'm
so
trying
I
to find some good here.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Let's,
think we talked about. I think we talked about it a little
connection.
bit. I think we've talked about it a little bit on Hash Church, and that is that, you know,
Yeah.
we thought that RFK, who was maybe, you know, not, you know, pro-vaccine but more pro complementary health. I mean, again, the National Center for Integrative and Complementary Health is the center in the NIH that's looking at the medical benefits of cannabis. Okay.
Sure.
So
Sure.
the center that's saying, okay, they've recognized that the FDA approval process of taking a single active ingredient through clinical trials does not fit for cannabis, right? They need a different regulatory mechanism. So this is the center in the NIH that's saying, okay, let's develop the data so doctors can actually see how cannabis can benefit patients. And again, I could start going through the list of
This is the
different.
NIH. Is this not the same group that only allowed you to get funding if you looked for negative things on cannabis?
No,
for
no, no,
like
no.
50
No,
Okay,
that
so
was
that's
NIDA.
so Mark,
That's NIDA.
Mark,
Okay,
Mark,
yeah.
what you're thinking
Yeah.
about is NIDA. So again,
Yeah.
like I was going through and talking
Well,
about
I was confusing
Yeah.
them.
all of the institutes within the NIH. So another institute that funds cannabis research is the National Institute for Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases.
Was
Another
Kevin McKernan an NIH scientist or was he NIDA?
No, he's private.
But before that, I heard he worked as that he was in government.
No, he worked
he
for.
worked
was
on the
at,
Human Genome.
Genome
Yeah,
Project.
but he was before that. Yeah, he was actually at MIT,
Hmm.
and he was doing his PhD, and he discovered something related to genetic sequencing, and he left academia to join a private industry for his own company, and he built something called the Solid Sequencer. But I think they were funded by private industry,
Yeah. That's
private
sounds-
money, not public money.
Another institute within the NIH that funds cannabis research is the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communicative Disorders. Another institute is the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development. Another institute is the well-known National Heart and Lung and Blood Institute. Another institute is the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. That's where I sent my proposal for dealing with traumatic brain injury. Another institute is the National Cancer Institute. So all of these institutes make up the NIH. And so when you turn off the funding to the NIH, all of these institutes are basically affected. And what that means is those institutes evaluate grant proposals from professors like me all across the country, all across the world. In fact, Marcus, you'll be glad to know that the NIH funds research in Canada. Yes, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, has basically got grants that go to fucking Canada to help professors up there. So in
But dude,
fucking
it's not-
Canada.
I love the concept is amazing, Dr. Mark, but I'm telling you, if I was the boss and I hired a bunch of people to do a job and they did the job that those institutions, whether I don't know the work that all those institutions do. I just know how sick Americans are getting, bro.
I think you're
Like, dude, like
confusing-
I'm
you're
telling you, I
confusing-
would fire every one of them and be like, we got to get a fresh group in here because these
Okay.
numbers are shite.
Okay.
Judge
I mean,
Marcus,
bro,
I-
how
I-
can you defend it?
Marcus,
I'm gonna
I
have
think-
to be
I think
checking
you're
out here
confusing-
pretty
You're
soon,
confusing
so-
two things in government.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay? hold on.
Thanks.
Let me speak.
Well,
Please.
Nick's leaving, and it's his first time on Hash Church, and we've
Okay,
turned
go
this
ahead, Nick.
into
Nick, it's
politics
great to
church
see
now.
you.
So
Thank you for the work that you do stewarding ganja.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for letting me be a part of this, you guys. You know, I appreciate perspectives and stuff. I want to reemphasize kind of like the lens of trying to connect with one another and the Vesica, the middle road, as being kind of the power spot. And so also trigger. Pay attention to your triggers. You find yourself super triggered, take a step back and try to figure out how to untrigger yourself. That will help, I think, a lot.
I like
I
it.
love
Wise
that
words.
perspective.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus.
Get you on again one day soon.
All right.
Take care, Nick.
Take
Thanks,
care, you
brother.
guys.
I'm triggered.
I'm gonna get you-
Reinforce. Well, we're with you. We're with you. I think we all have the same mission. And I do think judging the fruit tree by its fruit, and have we, with all of our practices, evoked the healthiest situation? Yes, when if we are not finding the health that we're after, and you have our administrators who I don't think have the past administrators have a vote of confidence. Should we be looking to these systems that say, I'm going to inject you with a toxic substance and you're not allowed to have this non-toxic?
Yeah, like why do people go, oh, we got rid of measles, but then totally ignore the fact that every other disease is through the fucking roof. Obesity, like it's not to be ignored. And I don't really want to talk about this for much longer, but it's intense. We have to acknowledge America has never been unhealthier than it is today.
I think you're confusing a couple things, Marcus. So I think the FDA is the people who basically regulate what is allowed in food, like dyes and shit like that. The CDC is the Center for Disease Control. Those are the people who try to monitor, pandemic outbreaks and disease outbreaks and vaccinations and all that. The NIH, the National Institutes of Health,
they do the
what
science.
that is, it's a funding mechanism to get monies.
But if they don't get listened to, if they make massive discoveries, how simple is it? We know what causes a ton of these diseases. We just have to eliminate these from getting into our bodies. And if we can do that, we're just in a much better situation.
Well,
I think Mark highlight, I just want to say one thing. I think one thing you said, and I'm going to stop talking about this subject matter for a second because there's so much more to talk about. But the FDA, in my eyes, allows these industries to get away with the poison, right? We'll just lay that out there. And that's the issue from my perspective. Overall, it's the capitalistic mindset that we're going to replace this with that because it's cheaper. And the FDA allows that. I think Dr. Mark stifling the science is problematic. And I hear you loud and clear.
Can I also say that in October of 1992, NIDA became a part of the National Institute of Health, not Science, the NIH, the National Institute of Health.
Yeah.
So NIDA is a part of the National Institute of Health, the group that spent decades just trying to find any negative thing they could about cannabis. That group.
Well, the other thing that NIDA is big on funding these days is using cannabis as a replacement therapy for people who are addicted to opiates. So they fund a lot of studies that are looking at cannabis as a replacement for other painkillers. But the one thing about the FDA, so the FDA, there's a revolving door between the FDA, which is the government regulatory body that regulates big pharma and food, and big pharma itself. So big pharma executives go over to the
regulatory
FDA,
capture,
and likewise, people who worked at the FDA end up getting jobs at cushy pharmaceutical companies. So there's this revolving door. Just in industrial ag, it is the same way with the USDA. Like the USDA, the people who regulate agriculture in the United States probably had jobs at one time at Cargill or,
it's called regulatory capture.
Right.
It's called regulatory capture.
So there's this revolving door that exists between between the regulatory bodies that regulate the industries they regulate. So that is an inherent problem and a lot of politics involved with that. But Marcus, again, just to go back to the NIH itself and how to separate the NIH from the Food and Drug Administration, from the CDC, from those publicly facing organizations.
But don't those organizations, doesn't the NIH, like, aren't they feeding their science to those very organizations?
The NIH is the group in the government that evaluates research proposals from professors like me to give money out to colleges and universities that need that money to pay graduate students for chemicals, for travel to conferences. Basically that's taxpayer money, right? So that's money that basically they are responsible for making sure that the proposals are solid and that the proposals are reviewed. And right now with the shutdown with the NIH, they're not reviewing any new proposals. So that means no new money goes out, which has devastating effects for people who are in graduate school, who are relying on, a stipend. And now there's going to be people who are going to be dropping out of graduate school. Basically, you're fucking up the whole system in the way that we train scientists today. And so that's why it's a very important subject for people to hear, because actually there's something we can do about it, Marcus, and we'll stop right after this. Write your congressmen, write your senators, and let them know that shutting down the NIH is not fucking cool. They need to turn it back on. Now, I think like when they went through and doged people out of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and other essential functions in the U.S. government, they realized a couple of weeks later, holy shit, we just let all those nuclear guys go. We better hire those guys back before we blow our shit up, right?
That's right.
So they are like with the tariffs, he's reversing tariffs. He's doing stuff to get that splash in the news. That's just the way this guy operates. But then really down the road, I mean, there's people protesting from coast to coast on the control that these people have put over government agencies. They've closed down our freaking national parks, Marcus. I mean, the country's
what does that mean? You can't go to the park anymore?
No, but they've gotten rid of
Don't let them.
They've gotten rid of all the support staff.
Dr. Mark,
I always found it hilarious when I would see the sign, "The lake is closed at 5 p.m." and I'd just be like, "What?"
Dr. Mark, I have a specific chemist question and this has fascinated me and horrified me, and it's a little different. And I think we're in agreement with you. We want more research to be pushed forward. I think that is like some common ground.
And give the park rangers their damn jobs back. Holy shit.
But also let's open the
function.
idea that maybe our prior course isn't the healthiest, especially referencing the nuclear and the other things. But my question for you that is chemistry oriented.
Okay.
I've been studying, or more or less found, that what are called ethanol oxalates or lauryl alcohol ethanols or dodecanols or sodium lauryl phosphates, these products that are all detergents, deterring agents that come out of the petroleum industry and polyethylene cracking plants. These are the things that come, these are like the terpenes of petroleum. They come early out of the stacks where you get the oil, and so to me,
propylene and ethylene, man.
To me, the glycols, the propylene.
Knock on your cell phone or your iPad, because the plastics that you're talking about are all in that iPad.
They're not plastics. I'm talking about the detergent compounds that are placed in all of the soaps, all of the toothpastes, and there are different names. Cocoa glucoside is a name. Sodium lauryl phosphate is an ingredient that you'll find. And these are in all of the Dawn
sodium lauryl phosphate is naturally derived, but that's
they're not. You can say they're naturally derived, but it is a rather perverse.
Yeah, laurel comes out of the palm.
Well, let me get all the way through this, and thank you so much.
Sure.
Is that these things are pervasive, and there are PubMed, there are studies that show residue amounts are very offensive to our epithelial of our gut. And there is evidence, and their main function is permeability and as a deterring agent. These are the things that are in every pesticide. These are the things that you'll find in the pesticide section of Ace Hardware. They are ever present. They're in all the cleaners, all the modern decontamination sprays that these big box stores are using. Their fragrances. Okay, my main point is they're very persuasive, and I would consider them in our diet. Okay, what I found is that not only do these compounds, which look like long carbon chains, they look like snakes, they look insidious, but my estimation is that they are the main smoking gun of all autoimmune disease, in that they are likely getting into our bloodstream, possibly interacting with the endocannabinoid system in a way that is plugging in but not activating. And so why are we seeing
Based on what?
Based on what?
Well,
This-
like you're saying that these things are plugging into our endocannabinoid system based on what?
The way I'm looking at it is from a nutritional standpoint. What is it? The first thing you look at is what's in the diet. And I looked at the studies that say this is offending at very least our epidermis and epithelial layer of our gut. Okay, that is disambiguated, even residue amounts that might be found on dishes. And the main function of these things are detergents. So once you apply them to a dish, very hard to completely wipe it off. And if we're wearing it, okay. And again, I'm making a long hypothesis.
Yeah, what's your question?
Tested.
You have a question? You said you had a chemistry question. What's your question?
Yeah, the question is this a logical hypothesis that needs testing to you? Is it possible that the pesticides, that the sodium lauryl phosphates, the things in the toothpaste, the things that we put in our mouth, is it possible that that's causing disruption to our immune system and our endocannabinoid system?
Probably not like other things that we're exposed to. So first of all, sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS, is soap, right? That's basically generic soap. That is made from lauryl alcohol, which is a byproduct of palm oil processing. It's not come from petroleum. So you have a misconception on that.
What do they process that with?
Hold on a second. Hold on,
it comes out of the polyethylene cracking.
You got so much to say, dude. Let me talk, okay? You talked about ethoxylates, so let's talk about that for a second. Okay. So the things that do flash off of petroleum that are sort of like when you go by an oil processing plant and you'll see the thing burning, those are volatiles that sometimes they can't fractionate. But you can get things like petroleum can when you crack it, you make propylene and ethylene, right? So let's just talk about those. So propylene is a C3 fragment and ethylene is a C2 fragment. So with ethylene, it's just CH2 doubly bonded to CH2. What they do is they oxidize that to make something called EO, right? That's ethylene oxide, really toxic, really dangerous to deal with. But when you polymerize EO, you make something called polyethylene glycol, or PEG. You've probably heard of PEG before, right? A lot of these things have usually a polar head. Like in a detergent, you have something like an ammonium group, and then you have a long PEG chain, right? And basically, these are the things that form what are called micelles, right? Which are the things when you wash your hands with soap and you see those little bubbles form. Basically, what's happening is that the bubble is basically denaturing some of the grease and oils that are on your hand and basically getting trapped inside those, because those are hydrophobic molecules and greases, and you can't just run your hands under water. Maybe hot water will start melting that stuff, but the soap basically helps basically emulsify all those fats and oils, right? And so the point that you're bringing up, like around dish detergent and stuff that you use in your dishwasher or even laundry detergent, yeah, I mean, all those things are basically cheap fucking molecules that basically have a detergent action on soap or on dirt and grease, right?
And
so
and
stuff that
microbiology as well. That was what I was going to say.
this is
It's
the
like
main
you can
thing.
talk about the health consequences of having like trace amounts of these molecules left over after you do the dishes, but what about the alternative of not having taken the microbiology off of those dishes?
Well, here's
Yeah,
Right, like that
well,
also
I'm
has
gonna
an
give
incredibly
allow
serious
me to
health
give the
consequences.
solution for that, because that's really important. That's what people want to know, is how to, if I'm going to say I would like to remove these petroleum products from my,
But Mark's just showed you that it's not petroleum.
it's not petroleum, dude.
I
Not all
mean,
of them. Some of them. Are.
he didn't show me. What he said was that it's, and I understand the process of what is happening. And if sodium lauryl phosphate is being cooked and denatured with acids in a way that doesn't involve petroleum, the effect is the same of creating a deterring agent, like you mentioned, the PEG, which is the prescription to treat. And again, I come at this from addressing immunocompromised patients, and I discovered that one of the treatments that was being prescribed was binding agents combined with polyethylene glycol doses. So people were being told to digest large amounts of this. And to me, that's how I approached this was, is this an appropriate solution to detoxify the system by offending the biome that is going to produce the immune system? The immune system starts in our gut. And I think it is, and again, the one point of, does it come out of the polyethylene cracking plant or does it come out of some other factory? Okay, we can look into that. But okay, let me just jump to the solution. And I do think this is just important, because I do think ganja is everything. It's everything we eat, everything that comes out of the garden. And I do think these are the one thing that is hurting people the most is micro amounts of these detergents. So if you want to remove something that you think is harmful from your dish, Castile soap and warm water and mechanical wiping is enough to do this. Heat treatment would be enough to remove bacteria or things like this. And the other thing is simple acids.
Well, heat treatment, no, that's like the amount of heat that you can't just say stuff like that. The amount of heat that it takes to sterilize a plate is really intense.
I mean,
Autoclave,
but it is a number. It's not. I mean, I do it every day with a fire.
It's not efficient though. You're not cleaning nobody's cleaning their dishes by doing like they do that for
the argument that
high
applying
value
a toxic detergent to something is somehow more efficient if it's going to offend the immune systems of the entire population.
Look, if detergents and soaps were toxic, there'd be people dead all over the planet on it. It's not the issue that you think it is. Now, I get what you're saying.
I think it's a good hypothesis to test.
Well, yeah, but I would bet you $1 to a donut that all those studies basically show that this stuff is no more harmful than half of the other shit that we're exposed to.
I can send you studies right now.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. No matter what, there's definitely something that's getting into the food chain. Many somethings that are making people so unhealthy. That is a fact. Whatever it is,
they're not that different than glyphosate.
I mean, I definitely don't think you're wrong. I think there's all sorts of different things.
Right? It's just high fructose corn syrup. That's what it is, right?
How much plastic do you think is inside every one of you?
Yeah,
plastic is the problem.
I can't even imagine in my brain. Yet, I still remain hella grateful to join all of you every Sunday. People in the chat are so funny. They love to divide us. They're like, oh yeah, Ryan and Dr. Mark, they're on the side of science. It's like, we're all on the same side. We're all homies. We're allowed to disagree. We're allowed
No. I'm against everyone.
I'm calling for more science.
I will say this. For I don't know how many years, maybe 30 years, Skunkman Sam cleaned his bong with Dr. Bronner's. Every time you mention it,
I was gonna say.
I was even always like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like,
sometimes the old ways are the best. And it is we're in a radical state to say these synthetic detergents. That's a new thing. It's a new thing in our environment. And you know,
Listen,
plastic.
dude, I said, I remember people talking about a lot of different things, even 30 years ago. Sometimes it takes, put it this way, your statement right now will either age well or poorly. In 10 to 15 years from now, people could be like, holy fuck, that guy Adam was totally talking about this 15 years before science. Or it could be like, holy fuck, that guy Adam had no idea what he was talking about.
and
You
I'll
just
take
never
that
know
bet,
how it's
Mark.
gonna
I'll
play.
go all in. I'll take that bet. Your
I know
dollar
you
to
do, bro,
donuts.
because in the
I
Oh,
got
you
end,
already have.
it's all good.
You already has, yeah.
Dr. Bronner's endorsed by Skunkman Sam.
It
Like
is.
that.
It is. Skunk Van Sam approved. There's like a couple of 4-gallon jugs of it here, or 4-liter jugs of it.
Don't forget the
Oh,
apple cider
man.
vinegar for your laundry.
My favorite soap in the world, right there, man.
And remember that isopropyl alcohol also comes from propylene, which comes from petroleum.
Which is
So
why it
there you
shouldn't
go.
be used, and ethanol
Garbage.
can be used in place of it across
Yeah.
the board.
As it should be,
Ethanol,
really.
yeah,
ISO's
it's
poo-poo.
It's
Well,
hard to
And
find ethanol, though.
ethylene is also the gas that's produced by female cannabis plants that promotes femaleness. And if you block
Ooh.
ethylene, they become males. So it's all interconnected. I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you start saying chemicals, everything sounds pretty scary, but water is a chemical. THC is certainly a chemical. CO2 is a chemical. So life is just a bunch of chemical reactions happening under biology.
Yeah. Until you involve what Nick was talking about, the unseen, right? Because that's a whole other part of what's holding all of that into place. There's definitely an unseen. All you have to do is take some mushrooms and go to a fish show, right, Dr. Mark? And you can see some of the unseen through the lovely work of Chris Carota and the band.
Well, and there's also, I think, if you really get, and I'm not someone that really, understands this stuff too deeply, but I saw something on quantum mechanics the other day, and just, going from the breakdown of cells, and this is probably more up Dr. Mark's, um, type of mind. But when you start breaking down even atoms or these chemicals into their constituent, chemical elements, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, you can further break them down into electrons and neutrons, and then further break those molecules down into quarks and, I don't know, Mark, jump in, help me out here, muons, all these different types of subatomic particles, which are really just energy, right? And I'm not totally.
everything is everything.
Yeah, I'm not
So
really the
accurate.
most mystical person, but like when we are all these shared molecules that we pass around between us. And, I think that this is an area where some of the science and some of these more spiritual things come together on like a very deep molecular level. And I don't think any of us understand what's what, but it's undeniable that, we are, David used to just say this all the time, we are just all stardust,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, I mean, his daughter's name is Starchild, right? One of David's daughters has one of her names is Starchild. But there is an interconnectivity to it all. And I don't think anybody here is against trying to minimize some of these toxic compounds, or even who knows if they're toxic, but just new compounds, right? It doesn't really matter if they're toxic or not. We're doing this massive experiment on a global scale, unfortunately. And it would be nice if we could try to have, a more natural approach to things. But
It would be nice.
having saying that, I'm still going to be growing plants and analyzing them with a GC and
How dare
trying
you?
to isolate
You're
plants
part of the
with specific
problem.
with specific chemicals, and I'm going to be using science as a tool to help me
Fucker.
do that. And
Well,
that's what David did here too. So
That is what David did.
speaking of new compounds, to turn it back towards
there you
cannabis.
go. I wanted to talk to you about this. So please.
Yeah, so there's a new compound that was identified by a group in Korea, and they gave it a name. It's called
Cannabidiol.
Oxoa or some shit
A
like
new
that. I don't
compound
know.
in cannabis?
It's a new
Well,
cannabinoid, yes.
Whoa.
It basically
Just
is
a
a
new name.
metabolite of CBDA, right? So if you take CBDA and you oxidize it and metabolize it, that's what it is. This is not made by the plant, Brian. This is made by some fungus that lived on the plant, kind of
Okay,
like
interesting.
L-Sole.
Can you talk about cannabidiolsoin? I think that's
Yeah,
probably
I mean
related
it's
to
the
this.
same. So this compound's very similar to cannabidiolsoin, and cannabidiolsoin is a metabolite of CBDA. And so what happens is an enzyme or a T cell, or so T cells are super interesting because that's our cells that are in our immune system that as soon as it finds something foreign, it starts attacking it, right? And this is one of the reasons why, again, in things like COVID, there's something called cytokine storm because your immune system is getting mixed messages, and it's like Jean-Luc fire all weapons. And so in that fire all weapons, these T cells end up doing a lot of collateral damage in the lungs, and that's where COVID can get deadly. So what happens is T cells T cells are fucking amazing, man, because they could generate something called hydroxyl radical, which, if you know about anything about chemistry, you know that radicals are extremely reactive species. Sometimes they're very short lived because they're so reactive. And to think that a cell can actually generate such a reactive species without destroying itself with that very reactive species is just fucking amazing. Like there's some kind of
Dude,
protein architecture.
isn't THC produced, or sorry, hydrogen peroxide is produced in the formation of THCA, isn't it?
Uh, so say that again.
I believe that the formation of THC acid results in the
Is an
production of hydrogen
oxidation,
peroxide.
right? When you go from CBGA to THCA along the biosynthetic pathway, you have to suck up a mole of hydrogen, right? So CBGA, the precursor to THCA in the plant, has got one molecule of hydrogen extra. If you look at its molecular weight, is 316, right? And a molecular weight of THC is 314. So it basically needs to lose a molecule of hydrogen. And you're right, in the biological processing, there's things like NADH. You've probably heard of that, Ryan, right?
Yeah, of
Which
course.
is a nicotinamide. And so there's ways of basically absorbing that hydrogen. And so yeah, that hydrogen can react with a molecule of oxygen and make H2O2, right? So I think that's what you're referring to. It's just basically an oxidation. So THC synthase acts as basically an oxidant to basically convert CBGA into THCA. But the interesting thing here, like about cannabidiolsoin, is that if these microbes, or if a T cell, some type of immune cell, emits a hydroxyl radical at CBDA, it forms the epoxide at the double bond. So what was a double bond in the terpene portion of the molecule now becomes a three-membered ring with
We
an
need you to
oxygen.
have, when you're talking about this stuff, we should be having you on a screen.
Yeah, a little whiteboard right in the
No,
back.
we should, because
Draw
like
on the boards.
yeah,
Right.
we really
So you
should.
can see
Dude.
what the epoxide looks like. So then what happens to that epoxide is one of the hydroxyls, the hydroxyl group from the ring that's
Why
there.
don't you
Right?
bring up the molecule? Why don't you bring up the molecule and share your screen?
You want me to share my screen?
One of the
If you can.
One of the maybe the only effective uses of nicotine is like a acute dose shows. You mentioned the nicotinamide and the acetylcholine receptors to calm a cytokine storm. There's basically nicotine works against the immune system and can quiet it, and maybe in a different way that terpenes applied may be able to help with an infection of the lung, like getting terpenes in contact with these viruses I think is shown to be very effective. But the nicotine and calming an immune response in acute nature, because of course, I think nicotine with long-term use does turn the blood and affect the T cells that Mark was mentioning, basically creates a very cancer inviting environment and changes the lymphocytes into abnormal cell builders. But yeah, just that recently saw that nicotine acutely medicinally applied may help with that cytokine storm that Mark mentioned.
All right, so you want me to share my screen? Let me try this. I don't know. Have I done this before? I don't know if I've done this on the iPad.
If you
Let
could
me
just
see.
find like
Oh,
a
you're on an
molecular
iPad, yeah.
structure, or even just go to Zoom and
Oh,
or,
You
it
can
says
send
only
it to
the
me and I'll
host can-
share it
Hit
if
the
you're having a hard time.
Wikipedia.
Okay,
yeah,
here, let me
if you find the molecule and just show when you're talking about
here.
a
I'll
molecule, just
I'll put
point
it in
out
the
the
group
part.
chat here.
I just made it so you could share as well. So.
Yeah, that's all right. Anyway, it's just a
Oh, it's in
fucking
this group chat.
molecule, right?
Right, but it's good for I'm talking about for the audience, so they know what you're talking about.
What chat did you send that to?
Okay, hold on a second. I'm opening.
I think he sent it to the Zoom chat.
Well, I don't see it.
I have to copy the
I-
link first. Hold on a
I
second.
don't see it anyway. Just show
No,
your
no,
screen.
hold on. I'm opening it right now. Okay. All right. So
Opening the
This is
user
good.
manual
Good.
of the iPad.
yeah, so I'm not, like, what the
I like
fuck? are you doing?
emergency checklist.
Dude, I will tell you, coming on to Zoom on an iPad or a phone, I can't find anything. I
Yeah.
can't find anything. It is so counterintuitive and not natural. It's the opposite. I just
I'm
like coming
stuck on
with
it right now.
Oh, dude, I'm not like. There's so many different ways to slide and open and go and look, and I'm just like, no, I can't. I had to run Hash Church one time on my phone. Remember Sam's episode
Yeah, it was
when my power
it
went
was
out?
Sam's episode. That was the
Dude, let me
worst.
tell you, that's
All right, you want to
stressing out.
open up
Sam
that
fucking
paper,
with
Mark?
me.
It's in there.
Yes, absolutely. Let me open it up and then I'll share it here. I'm just sharing the whole paper, or am I sharing like
Well,
a
we can
particular?
just
Oh,
look
there's
at
the molecule, I think.
the molecule itself. Yeah, the molecule's
I
pretty
think
cool.
that's fucking
I just thought
crazy,
it would
dude.
be
That does not
helpful
look.
I just thought it would be helpful when Mark was explaining a molecule and talking about one side of the ring.
Of course.
He could be using his mouse over to show
Yeah.
everybody.
Now, click on that one, figure one, and blow that up, Marcus. Yeah. Okay. So if you look at compound number 1, right? See compound number 1? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a couple interesting aspects about this. So you see the 4-membered ring, which has got a carbon with a double bond to the oxygen, and there's a 4-membered ring. It looks like a square, and it's got an
Right
oxygen in
here.
it. That one right there, yes. So that's very interesting because what happened there is the hydroxyl group on the ring formed. This is what we call a lactone, and a 4-membered ring lactone is called a beta lactone. So this formation of a beta lactone, I've never ever seen in a cannabinoid before. So that's kind of cool. The other ring, so lift up to the thing that looks like home plate. It's got like a pentagon ring with oxygen. Yes, that ring right there is what we call a benzofuran ring, and that basically is the product that you get when you add one of the hydroxyls, one of the phenolic groups of CBDA to the epoxide. Now you see the other thing that says OH, Mark? You see the OH? Yeah. So that
HO.
OH, that oxygen there used to be the epoxide of the double bond, right? So what happened is the microbe or whatever, maybe a T cell or something, formed that epoxide, and then the epoxide closed to this tricyclic structure. Actually, this is a tetracyclic structure if you include the beta lactone, but you could still see down by the number 1, Marcus, there's still the double bond down there. And yes, that group right there is part of the exocyclic methylene that's in CBDA. So yeah, this is basically a CBDA. So if you look just to the right of that, Marcus, you'll actually see CBDA is the compound number 6, where R the R group there is equal to COOH, right? That would be CBDA. So that's basically made by cannabis or hemp or whatever you want to call it. Directly next to that is compound 9, which is delta 8. And then directly next to that, compound 10 is CBC. And then the compound next to that is number 11, is what happens when water reacts with that epoxide. So now what happens is, rather than the phenol reacting with that epoxide that's formed microbially on the cyclohexene ring, now we have 2OH. You see the 2OHs that are up there, Marcus? Yeah, those two. Those two result from opening of the epoxide now just with water. So, and the compounds that are below, you'll see compounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those molecular structures are basically pigments that. So this is a group of 14 people, 14 scientists in various universities in South Korea. And this isn't North Korea, right? Kim Jong-un Korea. This is the other Korea, the South Korea. And
Samsung.
They did an ethyl acetate extraction. So close that diagram, Mark, and go lower into the paper. Yeah, scroll down a little bit more. Scroll down, keep going. This is our chemistry lesson for today, folks. So
way better than you just talking alone. Or better,
yeah.
Well, so people have something to focus on.
Okay,
too.
so look at the cell viability data here. So basically what they're showing is that compound 1, which is that new compound, is basically killing 100% of the cells. That's pretty damn potent. That's good. But I want you to close this diagram, Marcus, and scroll down even further. So scroll down further, keep going. Okay, isolation of compounds. Okay, open up that scheme 1 right there. Okay, blow this up just a little bit if you can. Okay, so this is really cool. So look what they did. They started with 3.2 kilograms of cannabis sativa, and they did an extraction by refluxing it with 10 liters of ethanol. I mean, this is just so yeah, they're going to get a lot of pigments, right? Because if you take ethanol and you don't chill it, you're not going to get just extracting what's in the trichomes, but you're going to get all this extract was probably as dark as road tar. So
Probably
then they took
golden.
No, green, bro.
No, this, you see, those pigment molecules, Adam, are all dark black powders. In fact, we'll scroll up and actually show where they actually isolated some of those. And yes, they were black powders. They were basically what happens. The reason why they're green in the plant and they turn black when you isolate them. So when you take chlorophyll out of the plant, you'll notice that the plant might be like a light lime green or like more of like a Kelly green. But as soon as you extract that shit out, it turns dark because now you've taken the plant pigment out of its natural, place, which is inside the chloroplast of the cell, right, where it's guarded from oxygen, and now it's basically oxidizing. And so by the time they isolated those compounds 2 through 6, those things had all been oxidized. And I think without exception, they're all black powders. But let's walk through this extraction scheme because it's pretty interesting. So they started with more than 3 kilograms of cannabis. Now, those of us who have washed and who have extracted we know how much 3 kilograms. That's 3 kilograms is fair amount of material. So you could see what they did is they got after doing an ethyl acetate extraction is they get about 18.9 grams. So they're reducing that 3.2 kilograms just down to a 18-gram thing, which then they took on to several other different purifications. So they're just using, this is similar to CRC.
What is ethyl acetate?
Ethyl acetate is a solvent. That's the solvent that smells like nail polish remover or bowling alley wax. Like if you've gone into a bowling alley right after they've waxed it, you'll smell ethyl acetate.
Where does that come from?
Ethyl acetate comes from acetic acid and ethanol, which come from microbe. Those are produced microbially. Well, ethanol we know is produced by yeast, and acetic acid is a byproduct of the shikimate acid pathway that's used to produce vitamin C and a bunch of other shit. I mean, acetic acid is just the item of commerce. It's vinegar. Okay. So vinegar and ethanol, if you make the ester of those two compounds, you get ethyl acetate. And again, that's the stuff that if your mom ever used nail polish remover and you're like, what's that sweet smell? It was probably a combination of acetone and ethyl acetate. So it's a pretty good solvent for cannabinoids, but it's also a good solvent for all these pigments. But if you go over to the right side part of the screen, Marcus, can you highlight where it says compound 1, 5.7 milligrams? So this new cannabinoid from 3.2 kilograms of material, they only isolated 5.7 milligrams of that new cannabinoid.
What was their total yield of isolate?
Well, yeah, they're not making an isolate. They're just taking
extract. I mean, what's their extract total weight?
Okay, so if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that they got 29 milligrams of compound 10. I think compound 10 was the dihydroxy CBD derivative. Or no, that was compound 11, right? Compound 10 was CBC.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Compound 2, I believe, was CBD. Compound 3, I think, was CBDA. Compound 6, 7, and 8, I think, were those pigments. But this just tells you basically how they fractionated all those materials. But again, suffice to say, these aren't.
They just did this on silica?
Yeah. Well, it says the conditions. Yeah. This is basically silica gel chromatography. You see above the 5.7 milligrams, Ryan, it says C18. That means it was done by
it's like a GC column.
Reverse phase preparative chromatography. So that was purified where they took the extract precursor, which was only looks like it was at 18.9 grams, and they separated that out to give just 5.7 milligrams.
They got 18 grams of extract from 3 kgs.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot, right?
Fuck?
This is
either they were terrible at this extraction process, or they
might not have been flour.
Material.
These guys are in Korea, so if you check the cannabis laws in Korea, I mean, they have
like hemp laws.
Like if you get caught smoking a joint, you go to jail. I mean, there's like no.
Yeah, this is taken from CBD material, clearly, right? So,
Dr. Mark, what's the function of the methanol and the hexane?
Yeah, so
maybe ethanol doesn't.
Great question.
Yeah, what do they do that ethanol doesn't do?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So all these different combinations of solvent like chloroform and methanol or N-hexane acetone, they all have different polarities, and the different polarities are able to manifest different separations because of the way that the molecule sticks to the silica. In general, the more polar your solvent is, the faster it'll run through silica. So ethanol, it's very polar, so it just pushes everything through silica without getting much separation between the different components. But if you look at the, Marcus, you could probably point out like where it says silica gel hexane acetone and then C18 methanol water. So as soon as you see C18, that's something called reverse phase. So silica gel is what we call normal phase, and that's where the more polar the compound, the more it sticks to silica gel. With C18, it's reverse phase. So now the more polar the compound, the faster it goes through. And the reason why is because what C18 is it's chemically modified silica where they put C18, which is derived from oleic acid. That's a naturally occurring fatty acid. They hydrogenate that to make stearic acid, and then they use that stearic acid to basically coat the silica particles, right? So now the hydrophobic non-polar compounds are going to stick to the silica gel because they've been modified to increase its hydrophobicity, right? And now the polar compounds come through first. So when you hear about HPLC and the way that cannabinoid COAs are typically evaluated in terms of cannabinoid potency, they run HPLC, which stands for high performance liquid chromatography. And more times than not, they use a C18 column and elute with things like methanol, water. We use acetonitrile water, and we actually buffer it with a little bit of ammonium formate because we find out we get better baseline separation between the cannabinoids when we do that. But I think the thing that the audience ought to appreciate from this is that when they see a paper like this and they're like, ooh, new cannabinoids, oh boy, you know, can we get some of that isolate? No, because these are just trace components that are in this material, which is over in South Korea. So God knows how old it is.
Yeah, and how much is the process half baking those into existence versus them
Oh,
being
and this is a
present?
bunch of scientists in the lab. This isn't like weed extractors. They don't know about CRC. They don't know about all that we know. But like the cool thing is that they looked at its cancer activity, and these things are fairly active. So again, that means that when you take a whole plant extract that has these trace components in there, you're putting things into your body that are going to fight. In this case, they were looking at glioblastoma multiforme. So they were looking at hematoblastoma cells, and these are very, aggressive cancers. Typically, by the time you find out you have glioblastoma multiforme, it's often too late. They have to just start removing sections of your brain. And my son's karate teacher, this was maybe about close to 15, 20 years ago now, passed away from glioblastoma multiforme. And he was the healthiest guy. The guy used to run like 2.5, 3 miles every day. He was our local karate instructor at our local karate school. So he was really a very extremely healthy guy, but he did not smoke weed. He did not smoke weed. And even after he got GBM, I tried to talk to him. I was like, hey, cannabinoids can really fight GBM, and, you should really, but his doctors didn't recommend it. But this is, again, going back to the NIH previous discussion, there's people at the NIH who are funding work, helping us understand whether or not we can actually combat glioblastoma multiforme. And this stuff right here, our HHCA itself, showed activity against glioblastoma multiforme. So, I mean, what we believe is that, again, maybe by consuming cannabis, what you're doing is you're putting whole extract compounds like what these Korean folks have identified into the fatty tissues of your body that include your brain, and include your liver, and includes your pancreas. And maybe, just maybe, there's a prophylactic effect that these compounds have to protect the fatty tissues in your body, including those organs, from succumbing to cancer like this.
I love it. That is the truth. The full extra, and again, you said smoking. I do think there is, because that's where people mainly go, is the smoking. And I do think it in the dietary, putting these compounds, in the gut where your body would be making the 2-AG and anandamide that then go to your immune system that then encourage the apoptosis. So I do think that, like, very much delivering it through the stomach or a tincture, getting it in them, is very valuable. I think
and also the pigments too, Adam. I mean, for most of us,
you're saying, is that what you mean?
Most of us cannabis purists, I mean, we like it in more purified form, like a good live resin or diamonds or things that basically don't have any of the pigment in there at all. In fact, in the process, we usually remove pigment and remove things that are highly colored because, we want. What is it with humans and white powders? I don't know, man. We just love them.
I mean, I heard no white powders used to be the heady rule, but this is full body. And this resembles fire to me. This resembles
Yeah.
sunlight.
Well,
And I, you know,
again, so
one thing,
Adam, that the yellow color and the golden color in there is probably due to not cannabinoids. It's probably due to flavonoids. Flavonoids are highly colored.
it
And
is beautiful flavor. And I did pass this cold ethanol through a ceramic filter, you know,
yeah,
just but I do recognize that if I was going to present the body with everything the plant has, eating the skin of the resin head may have value.
right. I mean, those lipids are chemically very similar to the compounds that you were talking about earlier. Like sodium lauryl sulfate is a lipid. It's, you know, it's basically
yeah.
a long chain hydrocarbon with a polar head that can form a self-assembled micelle, because, you know, the yin and yang of hydrophobic, hydrophilic, basically these things self-assemble into these micelles. And that's also the nature of, I know we've talked about it before, Marcus, liposome technology is similar to micelles, because what liposomes are kind of like, rather than a three-dimensional sphere, which is kind of like the way that we approximate what a micelle is, a liposome is a donut, right? It's kind of like this circular thing where it's just kind of like, you know, kind of like self-assembles into this crazy thing. And yeah, these things are great vehicles for cannabinoids, because cannabinoids aren't water soluble, right? You ever try cleaning your bong out with water? Doesn't work too well, right? So
Dr. Mark, that's what triggered my intuition that the detergents were offending the system that we are looking to edify, and that specifically what you're calling these neural transporters, or the presence of the lipid in the presence of the terpene being a mover, and the product of the endols and phenols in the gut with a healthy diet, and in the plant with a healthy plant. Like this connection, that's kind of how I got there, was what is edifying the immune system, and then what could possibly be offending it and dampening it. And so that was
I mean, there might be something to that, and the increase and rise of autism might be related to that somehow. I mean, I think there could be a lot of epidemiological studies, again, funded by the NIH, to basically try to figure this shit out, because the environment we live in is a very complex biological mechanism. Our bodies are very complex biological mechanisms. We have to coexist, just like those trees and those nitrogen loving soil microbes that are in the soil. You know, we're just a cog in the wheel here, man. Like maybe the ultimate expression of humanity is the fact that, you know, humans, yeah, created things, synthetic things here that weren't made naturally, right? And you think about these so-called forever compounds like PFOA and PFOS and all that stuff, right?
Persistence.
That stuff was not here until, you know, companies made these things thinking that they were going to be useful in various products. You know, if you had a Big Mac between the years 1965 and 1985, the wrapper that Big Mac came in was just coated with that forever molecule. So it's in our bloodstreams. They don't degrade. A million years from now, the only thing that will be left are these compounds, because they don't degrade in the environment.
They become volatile. You know, they spray them on the food in California.
Right.
It warms up. They become volatile. They become aromatic. They travel. They find them at the polar ice caps. They can
do. Yep.
Something they put. This persistence is the problems of why they bioaccumulate. And again, to me, the large solution is stop poisoning our system and start.
So I mean that's again one of the things that, you know, the public policy that our government ought to be doing to protect our country and the environment is making sure that we have the brightest and best people working on these very complex problems. And they can only work on those problems if they're funded, right? So the funding that we get from our government helps us say, okay, these compounds should have never been produced, should have never been released into the environment. But now that they're there, we need to fund the scientific research to understand how we can mitigate these problems and how we could solve these very complex problems.
I'm available to
Not just
dedicate some
having to
time as
do
your
with
grant
not
writer.
just having to do with forever chemicals, but like with energy and with agriculture. And ultimately, again, when you're talking about having to feed more people on this planet with less arable land, hemp starts to make a whole lot more sense here for several reasons. The most biggest reason is the amount of protein per acre you can get from hemp versus the next thing down, which is soybeans. But now you're talking about taking on the likes of industrial ag like Archer's Daniel Midland and Cargill and Bunge and all these huge mega industrial ag companies that have a lot of money and a lot of political influence on the
Well, that's why
regulatory
hemp didn't
bodies.
bump them off at all. Hemp just became bougie. It's $20 a liter for the oil. Like who could fucking afford that? Like that's expensive.
Cheaper
That's
than
not like
motor
a
oil, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, but so at some point, Mark, if you think of it like this, that like if you're needing to feed livestock and you need protein feed, it's like protein per acre. So right now, soybean is somewhere like around 385 pounds of soluble protein per acre. With hemp, they think that the estimates are somewhere in the around 1,000. So it's like
Amazing.
3 times better. And guess what? You don't need genetically modified hemp plants. You don't need to apply a canopy of pesticides and all other kinds of fucking shit. But now again, you're taking on huge financial interests that have been basically invested into keeping soybeans as the king for protein production. When it comes down to it, protein per acre, if you're a farmer and you need to feed livestock, all you want is yield. And hemp not only will give you the yield and protein, but guess what? Now you have all that fiber and bagasse as the byproduct. Now what you're going to find is that as the hemp starts to overtake soybeans, which I think it eventually will, maybe in 10 or 20 years, is that you'll get seed crushing operations coexisting with paper and processing mills, similar to the way that lumber mills and paper mills kind of exist, right? So what happens? You mow all those trees down in Canada, then they bring it to a lumber mill, right? They slice it up into 2x4s to send down to Los Angeles for the Home Depot, right? And then when all of those, all the sawdust and all the bark and all the crap, that all gets basically pulped into paper and pulp. So the way that the paper and pulp industry exists coexists with the lumber industry right now. I think what we'll see when hemp takes the place of soybean as being the protein of choice is that now we'll get seed crushing operations, right? Which is, again, capital investment. Companies, large companies basically need to put in seed crushing operations next to very large farms where they're growing real hemp. I'm not talking about low THC cannabis. I'm talking about real hemp as hemp is in our beloved Canada, right? So, at the end of the day, dude, it's going to be food that drives hemp. We need more food on this planet. We need to feed more people. And the red meat diet needs protein because those cows do not produce lysine. They need to eat lysine. So they need lysine from basically protein, plant
What an amazing
protein.
fodder.
Well, and there's
Cattle.
all kinds of different economic drivers, but ultimately everyone has to eat, right? Not everyone smokes weed, but everyone has to eat, right? So ultimately, I think the driver for hemp taking over, and I'm not talking about high CBD, drug variety hemp, type 3 cannabis. I'm talking about finola hemp, like what's grown up in Canada. So
Yeah,
And
Queen Victoria.
Zolotanosia and Compulti.
yes.
Yeah, I think Marcus, you went through this with Manitoba Harvest, and your time with that was really early, right? And you saw this idea of hey, how do we use this for fiber? How do we use this for seed and heartlets and things that went, more utilitarian and more, as Dr. Mark said, towards the food chain, and, I think, Dr. Mark, the one thing you're highlighting here is like there's so much industry that has to be created for that to really truly ensue, like there's layers of business that has to happen. It's not just we
It's
grow.
billions of
Yeah,
infrastructure.
it's like,
We
yeah,
learned that. That's why we went seed. It was like we thought we would just do 50,000 commercial products. It's like, yeah, okay, where's the $1 trillion that you're
right.
going to invest? Because the cotton ginny, like it got started so early and it opened up
Right.
cotton, and then there was this multi-decades of growth to get to where we are today. Hemp, all of that was just buried, and so there was no like industry moving forward for hemp, and just to do fiber, to do cloth, to do like
Yeah.
paper, those are major investments. The seed was a little bit less so because it was like, well, let's just grow for seed, we'll figure it out. We grew for seed for like 4 years or something, 3 years before they changed the law to experimental, where you could actually grow for profit. But I do want to take a little break. We can get right back to this conversation because it's wonderful and great. But I want to give away a pack of Rosin Screams that the press club was kind enough with their sponsorship today to offer to give away. So I am just going to go and share this page here of the giveaway. Looks like we only have 78 entries. I don't know if I fucked up how I did this. There should be 300 entries because we have over 300 people in chat and everyone's typing. But if you want to type a word, like maybe you think you haven't typed a word in the last 15 minutes, that's the longest amount of time I can get to keep someone in. Otherwise, I'd put an hour. So yeah, if you type real quick here, you can see even on the page there's a couple, Big John at the bottom. There was a couple that got removed because they hadn't typed for over 15 minutes. But I'll just give it a few minutes and then we'll give away these bags from the Press Club. You can check them out at thepressclub.co. They are also in the chat room right now, so you can talk to them. Good guys, good little family operated small business that's been rocking and rolling since 2016. And he definitely sent me a very nice email originally telling me about how inspired he was by Hash Church and his story about how he got into a lot of this stuff. And so it's always nice to see the full circle come around, and people that were inspired maybe over 10 years ago or 8 years ago are now a part of helping and hooking us up. Any questions, hit us up, they say. 116 entries. Well, it looks like people are waking up now. Like I said, please, when I do these entries, the worst thing is, luckily, you don't have to worry about me shipping this, although I did ship T-Man's Puffco last week. That got shipped out. My wife shipped it out, I should say. But I'm the worst. I can be a flake sometimes, and things can sit on my desk for a long time. So how I'm doing sponsorship giveaways is they are responsible. It's their brand, it's their name. Why should I let them take the chance on sending me something and then me giving them a bit of a bad name by, it's always a bummer when a giveaway turns into a bummer because it's been 7 weeks and you still haven't got the thing you were promised to win. How are you enjoying your Puffco, by the way, Dr. Mark? Did you get a Puffco? You still using that old one?
Well, there they are.
3D XL, baby.
There they are.
Dude, that's
Thank you so much, Marcus. I appreciate your generosity and friendship, and I thanked Roger and you on a group text. And yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, man. When that arrived in the mail, I had no idea what it was. I totally forgot that I gave you my address, but I got really choked up. I'm like, wow, man, these guys care about me so much. I've been rocking this guy for a couple of years now, but they care about me so much to give me, new stuff. I haven't broken it out yet. It's still in its wrapper, but I will. And I wanted to show everyone. I just made some nice HHCA, and I'm using
going down.
Some gelato terps here with it, and yeah, it's getting
He's
nice.
got everything deconstructed like a chef. Well, dude, listen, all that thanks goes to Puffco. Really, they are
Yes.
the kind ones. So shout out to Puffco
Well,
for sponsoring and hooking everyone up on Hash Church.
Marcus, that one episode that we had, like maybe like about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, where you had Roger on for the first time in a while. That was the first time Roger and I had connected in like 6 years. And so, yeah, it was so cool because I consulted with them early on before they really blew up.
I
And
know,
now,
dude. That's such a cool story.
well,
Helping them out
yeah,
with
it
the
was,
science.
well, and he reached back out to me because he recalled like, our time that we spent together, and it was really fun. So yeah, it was really cool to kind of reconnect on Hash Church. That was fun.
All right, well, I'm going to do this giveaway. It looks like 126 entries. Choose the winner. It looks like that is so funny. John Burfello official.
It's rigged, or he's got his AI going on it. Is what's going
Yeah.
on.
Dude, that is hilarious that Johnny B. No, that's amazing. Johnny B really deserves that shit, dude. I mean, you guys are seeing this, right? Like you see this on the screen.
That's amazing, man.
Dude, out of 128 people, it chose Johnny fucking B. And here's the thing. I bet you there's not a person in chat who won't be so stoked, even though they're all saying it's rigged, who won't be so stoked that Johnny B won. Johnny fucking B. I'll tell you one thing. From the press club's perspective, you couldn't have asked for a better fucking person to win your free bags because he'll do a YouTube video on that shit. He'll do a whole review and process some hash and fucking A, man. Johnny B. Well, you know what? I don't need his address because I fucking know it. That is so funny. I'm just like, I would have never in a million years guessed that it would have chosen Johnny B. And I'll tell you something. Johnny is a moderator in my room. And originally, I didn't have the moderator button clicked. And then I thought, well, why can't the moderators win? Why is that? I have unique winner, which is set up so that once you win, you don't win again. So I have that set up on it, but I clicked the button for this one that moderators, because I thought, well, Bingo and Chimera, these guys are all super helpful, like awesome people. There's no reason why. It's totally transparent. I'm not choosing them. And it actually chose fucking Johnny B. Congratulations, Johnny B. Hook you
It
up
is
with
well
some press
deserved.
bags. Yeah, totally well deserved, dude.
Yeah,
That's
Johnny
awesome.
is a classy character. He can be pretty hyper, but he is 100% integrity in heart.
Yes, he means no harm at all. That is awesome. Well, we'll have to get him in here to talk about his big win. Fucking awesome, dude.
I sent
So
him a
good.
text message. Sent him
Oh, we got the
congrats.
dog. We got the dog. I was wondering where the puppy was all Sunday morning. I was like, come
Now
on, dude,
maybe
that's
2 weeks from now it could be a Hash Church winner of one of the Wolf Mountain Ovcharka Caucasian Shepherds.
dude, those dogs
Beauty.
are beautiful, man.
Dr.
Yeah,
Mark
they
seems
are.
like a cat person, but I thought he might accept some of my ideas easier if I brought a cuter messenger.
Get that dog vaccinated.
That's fucking hilarious, dude. That is so good.
It's so funny. I think I did want
Love you
to
guys.
I did want to mention the hemp fields and just even the idea of like a fast growing carbon sequestering crop and like seeds, or I would love bushels of hemp seeds that I could proliferate and use to green up the world. This is a thing that the more that becomes accessible to people, even sprouting them, taking them as fodder for the cattle and sprouting them and creating an enzyme rich feed that isn't just the proteins. I think there's such a cool use for it just in the seed. I have a glue lamb rafter in my house. And these are compressed wood with glues, the nasty urea based polys, but it is something being used. A lot of the houses and building materials are glued together these days. And I could see having compressed hemp stock replacing the need for a lot of the timbers that are taken out of the forests. And something that's extremely regenerative. Johnny B, congratulations. Couldn't have happened to a freaking better head. Look at you.
I'm just like I'm sitting here doing a dab and I'm like playing chat and I jump in here and then roll a thing and my name comes up and I'm like, you kidding me? This is like I appreciate all you guys. Me listening this morning, just so much love you guys and just wow, I love it. The universe was meant to be.
It's awesome. It was, dude, when I saw the name, I had to read it like 3 times in a row. I was like, the official Johnny Barfello? What the fuck? Johnny B1? I didn't even see you in chat, dude. So awesome. I'm glad. I'll get your address off to Jeffrey over there, and I will make sure that maybe I come over when you film your review on it.
Well, fuck yeah.
You've got a rosin press, I know that.
Well, it's just hasn't been sitting there for a long time.
Just sitting in his living room for months. You should plug that fucking thing in, dude. It's a disservice to have a piece of equipment like that and not use it.
Like a year.
Yeah, like a year. Insult to injury. Are we puffing or is just Dr. Mark puffing?
I'm puffing.
What's going on here?
Rip, motherfuckers.
You know what? I got this blueberry smash, and this is like, wow. It's almost gone.
Dude, I've been enjoying the sauce, Rosin Labs. Shout out to those guys again, man. They hooked me up with like 5 or 6 flavors, the Poison OG and the Grease Bucket and the Bubble Gum. Their Grease Bucket and Bubble Gum is truly spectacular. Every time I open the jar and smell it, I literally in my mind go, wow. Which is just like, isn't that what cannabis is about? Don't you want to be doing? Brian knows what I'm talking about. He's got the wows over there. He knows. It's all about the wow, Brian.
The wow factor.
Dude, I'm telling you. And it was also, funny enough, it was something that people would say and do. Well, I called it originally the eyebrow raise, but the first time in the late 90s when I was pulling bags and showing people, and almost every single person, in fact, every single person, was seeing it for the first time. And so it was this kind of, as the bag came out of the water and the resin would kind of form almost, and then I'd kind of start doing this with the bags and make a little poo nugget out of it. And people would just be like, their eyebrows would go up. They'd be like, wow. It's like, exactly, man. That's all we're talking about. When we talk about in our snobby way of what we think the best is and in regards to breeding and processing and growing and all of these different things, it's really just about delivering an unadulterated version of that wow that the plant is producing in whatever we do. So that's where I'm coming from anyway. I'm about to take a dab. Join me if you got one. You can hear my Dab Right Pro in the background. Go ahead, Brian.
Talking about those 2-week terps and on the plant and into the breeding. I was kind of wondering what people are seeing out there these days for new strain, new plants, new breeding they've acquired or of their own. Audience or people here, anything really striking anyone? Just wondering.
Well, I know Chimera's got that linalool dominant stuff going on that's being sold in Canada, which is making waves. I know that we talked about Selena Diene with Johnny from Huckleberry Farms, which also seemed very unique and kind of off the beaten path. I've mentioned it more than a few times that I think, I was talking to Terry the other day from Hash and Flowers. What a great fucking character he is. Real flavor chaser. He's real, but he's old school. And I was kind of trying to tell him, in fact, Ryan, I told him, I want to hook you guys up because I think there's real value for you guys in being connected and knowing one another. He's got some of the best cuts. He has some of the most flavorful and tasty rosins that I've ever tasted anywhere in the world. His honey bananas was beyond wow factor. Like everyone that said they had honey bananas, it was like a 1 or a 2 or a 3. I maybe saw a couple of 5s. His was like a 9.8, 9.9. Like literally make your eyes water. Just like explosive flavor profiles. He's in Humboldt. He's in there. He's growing outdoors and he's growing, organically and with his, teas and living soils and whatnot. But he's got a flair, I think, for finding unique and novel things. And he's also got a place where he's creating a space for those things to kind of come into existence. And although they're rare, I think that, you know, with a guy like him finding those things with his olfactory and his wisdom and his knowledge, and a guy like you doing the breeding work, the science that needs to be done to actually capture it. And I hope that you and Johnny from Huckleberry Farms hook up as well. And I mean, honestly, dude, if I were you, I would be hooking up with all of these guys that, like Brian, who just they have this ability, this specialized olfactory and an ability to where they're growing and cracking seeds and bringing things into existence that you know, it would be good if we could trap more of those things and not let them disappear into the ether. Just something
Absolutely.
I was thinking about.
One of
Who is
the
this you were mentioning, Marcus? Who's this elder head that you were mentioning?
That was Terry from Hash and Flowers. So he wanted to name his company High as Fuck, but they wouldn't let him do it. So he was like, "Well, what's HAF?" He was like, "Oh, Hash and Flowers." So it's Hash and Flowers, but to anyone that actually knows Terry, it's High as Fuck. So Terry is the guy that punched out Professor Sift at one of the first Legends in Los Angeles because I guess he was working with him and grabbed his Honey Bananas cut. That was the alleged offense, and then he won Legends of Hash with it. So it was that was a whole drama that happened at the first Legends. I only got told about it by Addison. I did meet that next year in Barcelona both Professor Sift and Terry, both of whom seemed really nice. I mean, I spent less time with Professor Sift. I spent a lot of time with Terry, and I immediately just saw Terry as one of these. He just reminded me of like he's like a special energy, like that. He's like this guy needs to be protected at all costs. He's special. You know, he's reminded me of my mentor back from Winnipeg, Ron, and he's got little bits of Skunk Man in him, and he's just yeah, he's just, I think as I get older, I start recognizing this particular thing, and I think it's almost an unseen thing in heads and certain heads. And when you see that value, like, wouldn't it be nice to figure out a way to harness it?
Brian, I got these for you.
What
These
do you
are
got?
to the side. This is a Rainbow Z OGKB times
Ooh.
Sangria.
Dude, hold it in front of your body or we can't see it. Your white shirt. Yeah, exactly. You pull it down. When you were holding it up, I was like, he's gonna give him an empty pot? What the
cool
fuck is that?
camo print.
Sounds
Totally
amazing.
cool camo print. Here, let me open it up to
And then
gallery so it's
this
easy.
is OGKB Z times OG BX times sour Z, and this is this is for you as well. And then this is grapes and cream times the same mother. So this
Oh,
is
that's great. Love to try those out.
yeah, I'll get these over to you. I've got a bunch of other stuff too. I just got the lemon G back as well.
Okay.
So love to give that to you. It's a fantastic B1 stock to work with for those
I'd
lemon
love to
terps.
do some trading, some nice
Yeah.
stuff. Cloning here.
I need to
too.
trade you. You know how it goes, brother.
I'd love to. Sounds
Jerry is
amazing.
caring.
What kind of
Talking about those, Johnny B.
Every
Talking
2 hours.
about those, Johnny B.
I've been doing it for years. Got to do it. Peak state.
Perfect. Keep doing it.
I love that.
Keep doing it.
Talking about the flavors that are current, you know, we started with Nick talking about his coffee that came to Wolf Mountain. And that went into two things. One was a very myrcene dominant line out of the blueberry of Oregon. And the other was this, what became our spice melange, which had a caryophyllene dominance. And just an interesting part, I mentioned the nicotine as a therapy, maybe calming the cytokine storm or an inappropriate or overactive immune response, which is the thing that ends up sometimes bothering people, is the immune system over responding. Caryophyllene is another thing found in black pepper that can quiet that storm. And I just thought that that was really cool. Not, of course, non-toxic, doesn't have the negative effects of the nicotine. So I just learned that caryophyllene is, you know, a place to look if people have immune issues that they need to modulate.
It binds to CB, but it's beta carotene binds to CB2.
CB2.
They actually
Correct.
call it a dietary cannabinoid. A guy
Amazing.
named Jurg Gertsch, ICRS member, a bunch of years, showed that it was a CB2 receptor. And I actually just bought like a 3-month supply of it for a friend of mine that has ulcerative colitis back in the States. She was having a bit of a flare up, and they sell it here as like a liposomal capsule here in Europe. So
Amazing.
it's like there's some evidence in mice, at least in mice, they have a chemically induced model of ulcerative colitis, and they've used beta caryophyllene in that model, and
I read that article. I
yeah,
just read the article.
because
I
there's
think
also
a
CB2 is also present on immune cells.
Yep.
Right. So a lot of these times, like this kind of inflammation is actually autoimmune. It's like your immune system itself attacking a joint or, some kind of biological process that's causing the inflammation.
Right.
Dr. David Allen and I have a show called Cannabis Journal Club, and he covers some of this stuff. I know he has interest in bringing you in, Ryan Lee, as well as Dr. Mark. He has different shows that he wants to do with you guys as well. So we'll have to make that happen here in the near future.
Cool.
I think there's a reason why these varieties are so delicious to us, and maybe like, oh, there's a preference I have to blazing that flavor, and it is because it assimilates so well, and it maybe pushes towards medicinal.
It's an interesting concept to look at. Am I liking this because my senses are telling me I like it? Or is there a lot more going underneath of what the senses are plugged into where they know? Like I always thought when women got pregnant and they would have strange cravings, I always thought it was like a pregnancy intelligence that was telling them things they needed to put into their body. And maybe those things didn't make sense next to one another, like the classic pickles and ice cream or whatever. But perhaps they were requiring things in their body that the fetus needed to grow. And that's why they were having these cravings. I wonder if our desires are connected.
100%. I believe that they are.
Right. So if they are, then the science that we were talking shit about earlier, that's the science we're talking shit about. The science that convinces you poisonous, toxic chemicals are delicious should fucking disappear off of this planet because that's affecting the most.
Well, that's not science. It's like you said the other day. That's commercial. That's industry. That's commercialization. That's capitalism.
Yeah.
Right.
It is. It just couldn't be done without science, I guess. Like the invention of these, like it's like, oh, I know this is not real, or that this is not really delicious, but it's just telling. It reminds me of that scene in The Matrix where he's ratted everyone out, and he just wants to get back into the Matrix at this point in time.
So he can have his steak.
Yeah, he's eating the steak, and he's like,
I want to be someone famous.
Oh my God, dude.
I want to be someone important, like a movie star.
That's poignant because that is what the body needs. The pregnant woman needs electrolytes in the salty pickle and short chain fatty acids in the ice cream. These are building blocks. And that's like, there was a bit of the red meat. That is the essential building block, the amino acid. And so they're eating the gruel, the amino acid soup bath on the
straight up
Nebuchadnezzar, but he'd rather have the mouth pleasure with it. So, I mean, my mouth's watering right now, thinking of caryophyllene on my.
You just want the woman in red.
The woman in the red dress. The woman in red. Yeah, the woman in the red dress. Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? That was such a good fucking movie.
Well, listen, we know enough. I mean, I believe it. I mean, look, we just said it's known through science that, again, like beta caryophyllene binds to CB2. Linalool breaks down into one of the linalool metabolites, binds to the GABA receptors, right, which is the same receptor system that benzodiazepines bind to, and cause like anti-anxiety relief in the body. So there's, and I've seen it with enough people, and we've heard, Marcus, you've heard, how many people have you heard that just can't do the hazes? It makes them squirrely.
I know.
Right? Like even Zeus, the dude that was behind the P19, like apparently he was always all whacked, that weirdo terpinolene heady kind of weird guy.
Yeah,
And
it's not
it
for
works
everyone.
for some people or it doesn't, right? And I remember even Charlie Garcia telling me that like he's couldn't handle the terpentylene varieties. It made him too weird.
Yeah, it definitely, there's no doubt about that it has the effect on certain people that it makes them weird. Was that Cuban haze crossed with African haze?
I'm not sure.
Brian was holding up a seed pack.
Yes, he
Is terpinolene like almost like the end of the? Is it like a
Oh
half-baked
yeah.
version of these terpenes? Is it like the end of the chain? Like, does the myrcene and linalols, do these things like progress and change into other flavors? Like, is the sweet that like ganja presents due to the fact that like these different terpenes can exist and eventually recompose into somewhat novel flavors that is terpinolene.
No, okay, so like there's remember scent is an orchestra. Okay, so what we perceive as scent is really like it's like a cocktail of all these different chemicals, right? So terps are one layer of the chemicals, but there's also, these esters and there's thiols and these like garlicky notes, right? Like there's all these different compounds that can be kind of layered together. So I kind of think of them as ingredients, but the terpenes themselves are really inherited in what we call profiles, right? And so there's only so many archetypes of terpene profiles that exist, and all the different varieties really fit into those different archetypes. So, um, it just depends on how deep you want to break it down. But I think that we're going to keep learning about scent too. Like there's pieces of the puzzle that we still haven't learned.
And terpinolene, like this is the Jack, this is that train wreck style flavor.
Yeah, yeah, it's got kind of a piney scent, even though it's it kind of smells like what was the comparison I always use is like Mr. Clean pine
headache
salt.
inducing, right? And I think like the pining and the way that the pine trees don't permit anything to grow around it. I think this idea of like a clean industrial cleaner, and that being applicable if you need to
Pine trees do that through acidifying the soil. Like that's why they drop all their needles under the soil, and their needles are highly acidic. It acidifies the soil and makes it very inhospitable for other organisms.
That makes sense. I guess maybe I'm tying into the antimicrobial of the pinene and that the similarity of the pine sol to the terpinolene, and just like maybe it having a function that is cleansing.
Listen, you have you looked at the chemical structure of terpenes?
Yes, a little bit. But you mean just the compound shape?
Yeah, like if someone can pull up on their computer. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so I can't do it today. I would otherwise.
Yeah,
but Marcus,
you'll see
maybe
that
you could
you'll see
if you
that
could do like
terpinolene is an
terpinolene
isomer
chemicals.
of limonene.
Here, let him
Exactly.
finish so I can search for it.
I was going to say, pull up a picture of terpinolene chemical structure and then one of limonene chemical structure and see if you can find the same website for both so that they do the same type of drawing. But you'll see, like, I mean, monoterpenes, they all have the same number of carbons and hydrogens, right? They're relatively simple. What do they mark? C5H10? Is that what it is?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
That
yep, that's right.
Yeah, and it's just different rearrangement.
C5H10 is isoprene, right? And a hemiterpene is just one molecule of isoprene, and that's C5. But when you combine two C5s to get a C10, now you have monoterpene. Sesquiterpenes would be 15, right? And then the next one is a diterpene.
So sesquiterpenes are essentially 1.5 monoterpenes, is the way I think of it. You're right. Isoprene is the base unit, but
which is
the monoterps are C10H. What is it? C10H16? Is that what it is? But yeah, like if you see there you go. Like if you see limonene and terpinolene, they're very close. It's just that one of the double bonds is in a different spot.
That's right.
And so I now I don't know what your exact question is because you were also talking about like is terpinolene the end of the chain? Terpinolene is a very dominant. It's a dominant terpene profile. So if you
Okay.
cross two plants together and one of them is terpinolene, most of the plants are going to come out, if not all of them, are going to come out looking like terpinolene dominant.
I'll ask a
What was the
question,
other
Mark.
one you wanted me to search?
No,
Limonene.
Limonene. Thank
yeah,
you.
Marcus, bring that diagram back up again. Let me point out.
I will in 1 second.
Let me just state the question clear for Mark and Master Ryan. It's basically are there a beginning dominant terps that then the more nuanced sweets become? Like do the sesquas emanate from the monos? And like how is that chain and what are
they're built from the same building blocks, and then there's essentially an enzymatic cascade that happens depending on the genetics of that particular plant.
Right.
So some plants have the ability to hydroxylate terpenes, for example, and make like linalool, right? Like linalool is a hydroxylated terpene, monoterpene. But other
terpene. It's a terpenoid.
Terpenoid, sorry, yeah.
So terpenes, strictly speaking, are just the oligomers of isoprene, which is just hydrocarbon, right? And you hit it right, yeah, C5H10. But so here's the thing: like you're looking at the structure of limonene, it has a exocyclic methylene, so the double bond down at the bottom of the structure, if it migrates to make so it could isomerize to make terpinolene. Terpinolene is now a tetrasubstituted double bond, which is thermodynamically more stable.
Okay, but so slow down on the eggheadism. Try to let people know what that means from like in the context of this picture.
Okay,
so we got a double bond on the right side, on the bottom right side near that
CH. Bottom right side will isomerize to give terpinolene if it's heated up. So just thermally, you're basically pushing these molecules uphill, and when they roll downhill, they don't necessarily end up at the place they started at, because the tetrasubstituted double bond that's in terpinolene, where the double bond is in between the hexagonal ring, which is a cyclohexene ring, and now this 2-carbon tail, is now a tetrasubstituted double bond, which is thermodynamically more favorable. So just
this is or the other or terpinolene is.
Yes. So to answer Adam's question, you're absolutely right. So if given the opportunity, limonene with a little bit of heat, a little bit of light, and a little bit of acid stimuli can basically isomerize over to terpinolene. You will not get the reverse reaction because the reverse reaction is not thermodynamically favored. It's
right, these things aren't done by chemistry in the plant. They're done by enzyme, right?
Done by curing of the plant, done by its exposure to air.
No, that's not. No, because terpinolene is a dominant terpene profile. Essentially, anything that you cross to terpinolene, becomes terpinolene dominant. And the reason is there's got to be
to make terpinolene, but I'm saying that you can convert limonene, can convert over to terpinolene. Now you were talking about myrcene before. If myrcene reacts with a molecule of water, it makes either linalool or it makes geraniol, right? And linalool is the hydroxylated terpenoid that resembles lilac and right, it's got lavender, a very lavender, very, very floral smell, where geraniol smells floral too, but it has the rose oil kind of smell. Right. So if you look at those two structures, geraniol and linalool, you'll see that they're just isomers of each other depending on where the water reacts to make the hydroxyl group. If I remember correctly,
they're all acyclic, right? Are they not?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're monoterpenes as well.
Yeah.
They have the same number of carbons and hydrogens as limonene and terpinolene, but they have no ring structure to them.
That's correct.
Right. So people can go and it's an interesting little exercise for people that are in the chat and you want to learn about terpenes. Go to Google, type in the name of the terpene, and then type chemical structure.
Yeah.
think
Well, you can see
And
them side by side here. I flipped them around, so terpinolene and
Yeah.
limonene are right next to each other here.
Limonene.
nicely done.
Limonene,
Yeah.
sorry.
Limonene.
So yeah, you can see the terpinolene has the double bond between the benzene ring and the little tail, and on the other on the limonene, it's not like that.
Now, the other thing to show here, Ryan, is that where you have the limonene on the left-hand side, you'll see that hashed double bond. It's great to talk about hash double bond or hash bonds on hash church, right? So you see
Yeah.
the thing that looks like a staircase, right? Marcus, point to that. You see the thing that looks like a staircase? Yeah, that right there. So what that means pictorially is that that group goes into the plane of the computer screen, right? So that means that that's an asymmetric center. That means that there's a hydrogen that's coming out that's, not drawn on the molecule for clarity, but that this molecule basically goes into the computer screen. So on the right-hand side with terpinolene, you don't have any stereochemistry there at all. So the shapes of the molecules are different because of this carbon that's on limonene that basically is what we call a chiral center. So it's an asymmetric carbon
It's
because
like a pivot.
right
It's like
when
a
carbon
pivot point.
when carbon has 4 different groups on it, that means you could have an R isomer and its mirror image, which is the S isomer. In this particular case right here, this is the, let's see, let me do my 1, 1, 2, 3. So this would
R.
be going this way, which is R, but because it's coming out, it would actually, this is S limonene, or I think what's called D limonene. So L, which is the R stereocenter, is where this group would be coming out, and that would be drawn with a solid wedge as opposed to the staircase thing, which looks like it's going in. We call that a hashed bond, by the way. So that's kind of cool to talk about it on Hash Church, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm glad that was some quick downloading, screen saving, diptych, airdropping.
It was well done. Well done. It was you got the production hat on quite well, Marcus.
Stereochemistry. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to do another side by side comparison, pull up linalool and geraniol.
I
and
was
you could see how
pull up
those are related.
myrcene as well, because myrcene
Yeah.
is kind of the base molecule.
That's
For
this is
those
what
two. Right.
And just I'll give you another little piece of
gonna need you to
information.
get a
Sorry to cut you off,
presentation
man.
together.
Just let me give you one more little quick piece of information. Myrcene dominance is what we call the wild type in cannabis. So, like, if you look at most hops, it's myrcene dominant, and if you look at hemp, most hemp variety, like almost all of it is myrcene dominant, right? So, myrcene dominance seems to be the kind of naturally occurring state that you would find in like wild cannabis.
this is
And
what
as
le-
we
this, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is what led me down, was recognizing the blueberry, the myrcene being so dominant out of a lot of testing, SC labs, the initial things I was seeing, and then like a lot of the nuance and like the flavors I was finding that weren't even maybe showing up in testing, maybe because they weren't identified or looking for them. And looking at, and again, it was hashashin, or this idea of what is this generalized flavor of extremely cured or aged hash, and I was confusing that with terpinolene, and so there was a little confusion for me there.
So that's an interesting little. I'll give you a little tip because it kind of goes with today's lesson of the C5H10. Sorry, C10H16. If we then look up 6 sesquiterpenes, or Mark, I don't know if you can play producer again and pull up sesquiterpene chemical structure or beta caryophyllene chemical structure, what we'll see is that, remember what Mark said before, sesquiterpenes are 1.5. So like the sesquicentennial celebration of a country is the 150-year anniversary, right? And so sesqui really means 1.5 of. So a sesquiterpene is like 1.5 of a monoterpene. So it has 5 more carbons and 8 more hydrogens.
I love that. So this idea, my experience of flavor and maybe getting a lot of my effect and appreciation from these nuanced, cold cured over many months of flavors is that it was the mix of basic terpenes that weren't baked off or half baked to a point of generalization that
Yeah,
might
and
resemble
that's the thing. That's
cookies
the thing is
or
I'm trying to show you is the science of how these molecules work together, and how people can manipulate that, not manipulate the science, but how they can use the scientific principles to create the product that they want. Right. So hash has typically been sitting around. I mean, look, in traditional hash countries like Morocco, Afghanistan, they don't do the flour. They don't sift the flour until winter, right? So it's already kind of sat around for a long time, usually not in the greatest area, pretty dry. And a lot of those monoterps, because they're smaller molecules, they're more volatile. So you can think of them as they're literally lighter. Like they're from a molecular weight, they're lighter molecules. So they're more likely to become volatile and kind of blow away as the plant material is
anything
being
over
stored.
6 degrees Celsius or higher.
Um,
To me, that's my target is
Sorry to interrupt.
under
Was it geraniol? Geraniol that you wanted, Dr.
Geraniol.
geraniol, yeah, like geranium, but IOL.
It's IOL, not IAL.
Geraniol.
IOL, yeah,
There is
IOL.
geranial, which is IAL. I guess that's
Ah,
different.
that's a
So,
different molecule. That's an
yes, it
aldehyde.
is. That is a different molecule.
Geraniol is an alcohol.
Yeah, so
Yes.
linalool,
Oh, it
linalool is
changed
also an
it.
all.
Weird. ChemSpy. Oh no, there it is. My bad. Germinal. That's not what I'm looking for.
No, that's a completely different molecule.
Well, I need the correct spelling. I can't play around. If you guys want to supply me the exact spelling
Yeah,
of any particular terpene in the chat,
yeah,
I can find them. But to throw on having to like Google the correct spelling, that is also just too much right now.
you're doing
there
great.
you go. It's in the chat.
Geranial.
It ultimately is pictures of hexagons with letters next to them. So maybe we should even find a way to compose what these things really appear as.
But there's an interesting little piece of traditional info in there. The longer you hang around, and we've done these studies, the longer you hang around flour, just in bad conditions, the monoterps evaporate more than the sesquiterpenes, right? So the older resin gets, the more monoterpene loss you have, and the monoterpenes are really responsible kind of for the what I would call the sweeter and more floral notes of cannabis, like what I think is the good stuff: limonene, pinene, linalool, terpinolene. Those scents tend to blow away. Geraniol, even like those scents tend to disappear the longer you store the weed, right? Or the farther away from processing you get. I'd put it that way. And that's why hashish is so sesquiterpene dominant, right? There's a ton more sesquiterpenes in hashish, and sesquiterpenes to me are more like they're kind of more savory or roasty flavors, right? Beta caryophyllene and humulene is what's in hops. Yeah.
If they're stored too warmly, I really think cold chain is going to be the really evocative thing for users, and getting the flavors all the way down the mountain to into the bodies of the people. And the practices just aren't there yet. The shops in Hollywood are taking their regenerative flour, however nice they're prepared, and they're putting them in a warm cupboard. And yeah, I think there's improvement can be done. It's something as simple as keeping it cool. I think like even the idea of cookies, like you said, these savory flavors are just the effect of it coming out of someone's hot trunk or something like this, and not being protected. And once it's there, just a simple temperature degree can just have them literally evaporate. And I know everyone's doing things here to keep it cool through the process.
So this is linalool and geraniol. Left linalool, right geraniol. So I managed to put them side by side. If you guys wanted to have anything to say about that.
Nature's design is beautiful.
Yeah, well, I mean, so can you see the similarity between these and myrcene?
Yeah.
So where myrcene had a double bond, now you have a hydroxyl group. So basically, water has added to the double bond of myrcene, and it could add to either the double bond that makes linalool, or it could add to the double bond on the end, which makes geraniol. So it's just a very subtle nuance of molecular structure that changes these molecules enough that our olfactory spectroscopy can basically discern the difference between rose and lavender. Amazing. Marcus, I just put two other molecules in the chat. So nootkatone is a compound that is the grapefruit essence. In fact, nootkatone is a compound, a terpenoid that occurs in cannabis. So when you smell grapefruit smelling cannabis and that grapefruit essence, you get nootkatone. And what nootkatone is an oxidized form of something called valencine. Valencine is a sesquiterpene that is an oxidation away from making grapefruit. So this is basically, again,
have you seen nootkatone in analysis though?
There's not a whole lot of labs that evaluate for it, but I know the smell of that molecule. And yeah, I mean, there's things that basically hit that molecular weight when you do terpene, GCMS. So I assume that, yeah, there's definitely nootkatone. And I know that there's valencine. And if
Because
valencine,
we have a variety called grapefruit, and I've made a bunch of hybrids with it and done a bunch of analysis with it, and it's always terpinolene dominant. And I was starting to think that it was maybe some kind of ester molecule that was influencing us into that citrus
no,
aspect
that's
of the.
nootkatone, man. Nootkatone is the grapefruit molecule. When you smell nootkatone, you'll smell grapefruits.
Would you need to run like a 2D chromatography?
No, I got a GCMS at the lab at school. I could tell you whether nootkatone's in there because our GCMS has got the NIST library, which includes all terpenes and terpenoids. So if it's that terpene or terpenoid, I'd be able to tell you with a high degree of certainty on whether or not it's in there.
But you'd need an MS to bust it apart in a really slow run.
Well, I need the GC is the thing that separates it out. The mass spec basically is the molecular fingerprint that helps me identify whether it's that molecule or not.
Yeah, I've got an FID. It's not an MS detector.
The mass spectrometer is like an order of magnitude more sensitive, and so we see all kinds of shit in that thing. It's great. I love the mass spectrometer. It's really cool. But yeah, if you look at these two molecules, valencine again has a very orange smell. In fact, I think valencine more than limonene is the terpenoid that is in cannabis that really gives that real orangey, tangy kind of flavor. It's definitely it's a sesquiterpene, so it takes a lot more energy to boil it away. Nootkatone again has got that grapefruit smell. I'd be surprised, Ryan, if it's there in a huge concentration, because kind of like the sulfur compounds, these things
just a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, a little bit goes a long way. And they're sesquies, so that means they're not going away anytime soon. So they're not like fleeting like the more volatile monoterps.
And that's the other thing, Ryan, when I think about like a live product versus a cured product, they almost deserve their own categories, as difficult as that would be to get there in terms of consumers. It's like over the weekend, I was showing someone this jar that I have here, and it was a jar at one point of fresh press. And I said, listen, smell this. And they're like, oh, that's really sharp and sweet. And I said, well, tomorrow we'll smell it again and smell this other jar. And they're like, wow, that's really banana. And I said, well, these are it's the same varietal. This is just further along in the process. So things are happening and are evolving, and those esters from the banana side started to evolve more in jar B. And over time, it just completely changes the experience. And even the nose to all the way to the olfactory, you can it's an experiential difference too. It's a much more hazy experience. when there's an even balance of mono and sesca.
Yeah, isoamyl acetate is the banana smell, right? That's definitely totally banana. Isoamyl acetate, and that So the amyl group is a C5. So yeah, that could certainly be isoprene derived. So in a weird kind of way, it is kind of a terpene, but it's more of a terpenoid. I had the same discussion with the guys at Abstracts about those prenolated sulfides, which they're like, ooh, they're non-terpenes. It's like, well, no, not really, because they have a prenyl group in it. They are terpene derived. So those prenyl,
they're all built in the
sulfides
same. That's
compounds.
what the plant's doing. It's
Yeah.
trying to play Rector set with what the chemical pieces that it has around,
Yeah.
right? And prenylation is one of the tricks of cannabis. Like you've heard of sesqui CBG, it's just prenylated CBG, right?
Dude,
Well,
this guy just came in on a
CBGA.
hammock on
That's
a boat cruise.
On
Come on, we gotta this is ridiculous.
that CBGA, Ryan, is not made with geraniol pyrophosphate. It's made with farnesyl pyrophosphate, which so the precursor. It's not like CBGA converts and gets prenolated. It's like the precursor comes with that 5-carbon extra tail because it's using farnesyl and not geraniol pyrophosphate. Yeah.
Right.
Fascinating shit, right?
It is very fascinating. I think we're boring the class though. I think we've given them too
Are we losing
way.
people?
No, I was liking it.
We're mixing
Perfect.
the splicers with the groupers, and ultimately it's the same target. And how the nuance on how the flavors, how they affect, like Colin was saying, it's like smoking in extremely early, vaporizing terpenes that are extremely early lead to a very fun effect, a very uplifting effect. But it's possible.
And much more complex. Like the sharpness of the blueberry is lost the next almost as it cures. Like that really sweet sharpness, that sharp note. It's really I'd love to start doing tests through the cure process as to how
There you go. There you go.
And
I was just sitting there thinking to myself,
what is
I can't
testing?
wait until Colin starts testing this shit all the time.
Well, here's why. This is like the truth of it is I think we all need this because there's a lot to discover here. Chemistry is happening, right? At all points until you actually light the thing on fire or vaporize or whatever, however you're going to deliver it. And that I think is important because we're so sure of ourselves when we make things, right? We're like, oh, this is the formulation of this and this percentage point. But that rarely gets delivered to that patient, right? Unless it's like hours later, right? Or someone said earlier, like it's delivered at the perfect temperature all the way up until they get it and they're keeping it cold and it's keeping all of these things together. But I even question that because I don't even know if we understand what temperature to keep these things at because they all require something different if we're really honest about it. So it's also fleeting. And that inflection point, as I think Marcus said the other day and has continued to say, is what we chase, right? That really like volatile aspect of things. So it just deserves its own study, I think. And those are the things I think we, like with all the chemistry knowledge, Mark, as it changes form, I don't think any of us could pinpoint that form of change. And
well, I've always thought that the myrcene predominance in fresh flower can change chemically in the cure. And again, there's probably, a little bit of like, wine making, cheese making kind of stuff, yogurt making, food gone bad kind of thing, where it's the aging of cannabis that leads to myrcene forming hashishene. And perhaps as cannabis ages, I mean, think about it. It's losing water, right? So that means there's active water transport. Well, what's the difference between linalool and geraniol and myrcene? A molecule of water
and a little temperature,
oh
like you said.
Could the plant be changing its terpene profile because as it dries out, that molecule of water finds a terpene to react with? Absolutely.
No,
I mean,
that's enzyme driven. You don't.
Well,
That's not.
no,
Well, Dutch Blooms yesterday brought this up during their genetics talk. He was talking about dog walker, and he was like, when you grow it, it's really sweet and not as gassy. But dude, when you cure that thing and you finally open the bag, it's like all straight fuel gas to your fuel gas. And that make what you're saying, Dr. Mark, kind of makes a lot of sense in that respect. But I also understand what you're saying, Ryan, because it is driven by that, right? Let's not forget.
But why they're myrcene? Why they're like? It just doesn't make sense because we were growing myrcene. I had a plant Afgui that essentially was myrcene, and that was it. That was the
it
terpene
might
profile was
depend on
myrcene.
it. It might depend on how you're drying it and how you're curing it. If you're
No,
curing it
they're
at
all
all.
done in the same. They were all done in the same environment.
No, but there's definitely chemistry that can happen on those
I'm not
things. I
saying
mean, I
there's
think,
not. I'm not
yeah,
saying there's not. What I'm saying is we had plants that were only myrcene, and then I
okay.
had plants that would produce linalool. And I'd grow them in the same environment and dry them in the same environment. And one plant would have no linalool, and one plant and full of myrcene, and one plant would have linalool. It's not a randomly chemical driven reaction. These are enzyme driven reactions
Right, but
in the plant.
that's a unique set of conditions that I think you could again draw a lot of chemical reactions that can happen on curing because of what's happening to the physical state of the plant. But look at it this way,
Well,
Ryan.
if that's the case, show
It,
me. Don't tell me. Show me with data, like
Is
because
temperature the
well,
greatest
we've
catalyst
done
of
we've
chemical
done these.
reaction
You
and
got to remember, Mark.
metabolism?
I've done these experiments, right?
okay.
We've done this stuff. I don't know if you have growing all the plants and doing it, but we have.
No, I haven't done this with plants, but okay, so what I can tell you is that like geraniol is just any leftover geraniol pyrophosphate undergoes hydrolysis, there's geraniol, right? So there's already enzymes that are making geraniol, right? It doesn't need to be derived from myrcene, but the whole point I think of the cure is that there is a delicate dance of, call it degradation or decomposition or whatever, aging of flower material where the terpene profiles change. And it's not just due to evaporation, it's the relative amount of those terpenes do change. And that literature exists. I've read those papers. But what I can tell you again, too, is that it doesn't take
it's
a whole lot.
monoterpenes that go away.
It doesn't take a whole lot. If you just look at, again, what we looked at before between limonene and terpinolene, it doesn't take a whole lot of energy or influence to basically turn one thing into another. Those things, a lot of them interchange. They do.
I would like to
So
please speak to
I've
the
never
curation
ever
because
seen a terpinolene dominant sample become limonene. It just I've never seen that.
I think
That's
I
not. It's
yeah.
not
misheard.
supported. It's just not support. It's just not supported, Mark, by chemical
No,
analysis.
but so you missed my entire point, Ryan. I'm surprised because I thought you'd pick this up. You can't convert limonene into terpinolene. You can do the other thing the other way around, but you're talking about something that's
You said that
contrathermodynamic,
reverse, but
right?
you said it
You
that
meant the
reverse
other way around.
earlier.
You're
where the heat-
saying limonene plants would become terpinolene dominant.
yeah, the
No,
heat
I'm
Or not
not. No,
dominant,
I'm
but
not
they could
saying
have
that
some
at all.
drift.
I'm
They
not
could have
saying
some
that at
drift.
all.
They
No,
could
I'm
have
not
some
saying
drift.
that at
My
all.
apologies.
I'm saying that you could chemically convert limonene into terpinolene.
Right.
That can happen. And I suspect that there's a little bit of that kind of transformation that happens in the cure because you're removing water and you're interacting with oxygen and air. And there's, those terpenes, some of them are metastable and they want to go to terpenoids like camphor and other things like that. And those are all just made by enzymatic formation. Some of those are actually made by oxidation itself. And some of that oxidation, like what we talked about today with that strange new cannabinoid, might be actually happening microbially in a synergistic way on the plant itself. So yeah, is it enzyme driven? It certainly can be. But if you take a little bit of water and you take a little bit of myrcene and add an acid catalyst, you're going to make a mixture of geraniol and linalool.
Stay
Can't keep the
cool.
chemistry from happening.
Stay cool, everyone. I do just want to, I mean, curation. I would call myself a curator mainly. I do think that, you know, I've gotten resin 8 years on the flower, sealed in glass with a 6-month open air cure where the temperature was kept below 5 degrees centigrade from harvest on. And there are a few things, Mark, you called it a degradation. I do like to think of it as if we can keep these things cool enough, there is a regrading that happens, or a regradation, where the terps are literally melting into one another, recomposing themselves. I do think the ability to allow the gas exchange when the chlorophyll is converting and causing maybe caustic elements that, if trapped in a bag or a jar, will degrade both the flower and the resin. Whereas if there's an air exchange or an open air hanging with the coolness present, that allows for best keeping the flavors at home, not allowing them to become volatile, not allowing the limonene to advance to the terpinolene prematurely. So I really do think time, the further you mentioned cheese and wine, the further we can kind of allow the components that are present at harvest in the resin to remain as they are and slowly maybe go along metabolic change. Mainly, I think, again, not understanding the enzymatic change, but mainly temperature being the catalyst for metabolizing these things. Keeping it cool, eventually pulling the oxygen away from the resin and allowing in glass for the cure to continue at low temperatures. I think we will start to be delivering the fullest taste the rainbow flavors.
Yeah, I think the lesson that the discovery of hashishene really teaches us is that these molecules are reactive. And depending on how cannabis or hash or concentrates are stored, the reaction could be manifest in making new molecules. The fact is that hashishene isn't made by the plant. It's made by, basically, I'll use the term, a degradation reaction, right? You're degrading myrcene, which is made by the plant, into this thing called hashishene.
Which is made by some plants, yeah.
I think Ryan,
have you seen?
So the postulate that presents is that these terpenes are reactive, and if given the right environment, you know, maybe it's sunlight, maybe it's air, maybe it's a lack of water, maybe it's a little bit of all three, you can change the terpene profiles in plant material. Period. Right? Can we agree on that?
I agree.
Actually, let's talk about esterification of terpenes.
We can influence them, right? I mean, I don't know about change.
In theory, I think anything, you know, I think anything's possible, of course. I'd love to see the changing of terpenes during curing documented, right? Because again, we did these. Like, you have to remember,
I got a GCMS, man. Send me some fucking samples. Let's get fucking going,
you have
man.
to remember,
Dr. Mark, and lack of oxygen.
Right?
Mark, you have to remember, at NAPRO, we did all these studies, right? We did all these studies. And
yeah, but that shit's all locked up in some patent or some other shit. I mean, put this out there. I mean, let's forget about all that NAPRO
So
stuff.
hold on,
let's do
Ryan,
stuff now, man.
No, but I'm not saying let's not do stuff now, but it's like I can't because I know all that stuff, right?
Think about it. We
some
talked
of the
about
things
it on Hash Church. Send me a bunch of samples. We'll figure out whether or not this actually changes on storage. Like, send me like after 3 days, after a week, after 2 weeks, after 2 months, and we'll just get a profile on each one, and we'll look to see. Do certain terpenes
I'm
increase?
curious. I'm really curious, Ryan. Like, so you're saying you've done the tests day by day, week by week, or how many days, you know, through the cure of X amount of varietals? Like, what was just and then you had a control on this? And you just, and
your control is your early data points, right?
Right. So through, I'm just, because I'm curious, I'm just trying to understand so you guys did this, right? And you're saying through your experience of doing this, the data has shown that it doesn't
You don't
change,
have these drastic terpene profile changes.
there are no drastic. Is that's what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Got it.
What
Okay,
was
so
it?
again, okay, so that spawns the question that I have now of mono versus sesqua, and why when we make an extract such as hash, if you were to, let's say, leave it out, you would have a slightly different profile, or in the case that
Well,
I just
like, so in the short term, you don't lose. In the long term, you lose a lot more of your monoterps as a ratio. You got to remember, all this stuff is infused together in a resin. It's
sure.
not like they're individually like just dabbed on some piece of cotton, evaporate at a certain at a certain temperature, right? So,
Right, yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. I'm
so,
just trying to use
but
the
yeah, the
two different
monoterps
examples.
tend to start to fade away more quickly than the sesquiterps.
Right.
Right. And so, like, that's the type of change that you will see. Like, there's some of these other things that are being proposed. I'm not saying they can't happen in terms of chemistry. I'm just saying I haven't really seen that happen in
Got it.
in flowers being stored.
That's fascinating. So, like, in my head, just based on thinking of how VOCs operate and work, because there's such complexity here, there has to be change. And this is just theory. I guess this is my own theory based on what I know today. So, and then now what you're telling me today is fresh information to me, because it's challenging that. You're saying, dude, it doesn't change. Sure, the flower may cure, but from day one to let's say, 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in, you're largely
I'm not saying the scent doesn't change. I'm saying the terpene profile doesn't really change.
Right. It's just our
Right.
perception of that scent that changes when the monos dissipate and now this new bouquet comes up to take its place. It was always
Well,
there.
you got to remember terpenes are one factor in that orchestra. You can kind of think of it like, like the terpenes are maybe the brass of the orchestra, right?
Sure.
And the thiols are like the woodwinds or something like that. You kind of think of it in that, and the esters are another category of the orchestra, right? Like the
Right.
strings,
Well, that's
right?
what I was highlighting before with the rosin, right? Like the esters and the banana were like coming through more in kind of evolving the scent profile, if you will, in a way that was drastically different, So anyway, it's really, again, guys, like this to me, this is like just I love I love everyone's perspective, because it's data driven here on your behalf, Ryan, and Dr. Mark, same thing, it's just chemistry driven,
Yeah, well, and we all have the same kind of
Yeah.
thing that we want to understand.
Right.
Our work at NAPRO was all terpene driven. We collected some other stuff, but the vast amount, like thiols, hadn't even really been identified at that point in time.
100%. Like they're
Right.
fresh to everybody even today, right? I mean, let's be
Yeah,
real.
and that method of like there's the standard GC FID method for terpenes isn't going to detect thiols.
Right.
Right. So you like, in order to get the full picture of what is scent is a lot of chemistry. It's a lot of specific analytical chemistry. Just like we don't run cannabinoids and terpenes on one GC run, like those get run through different machines. You do one extraction, and then half goes to for cannabinoid content, and another subsection of that extract goes for terpene analysis, right?
Listen, this
Yeah.
whole
So it's like
conversation leads so beautifully into the conversation, the whole hash church that we're going to do, I hope soon. Originally, we said May a couple months ago with the guys from Abstract that Dr. Mark brought to the table. Marshall Legure, he was the PhD that came on here that was friends with Nick Ziegler. Nick Ziegler also, I haven't talked to him in about a month, but I'm hoping Jeremy Plum, Chimera. It's gonna be a really good conversation in regards to, very much what we're kind of tapping into right now, with just maybe some people who are also involved in doing that work, particularly the thiol work. I really want to go down that rabbit hole, but we have about
Jeremy Plum had a great take on terpenes, I thought, and was able
Oh,
to
dude,
take
Jeremy
analytics.
speaks. Yeah, he speaks. I'm sorry. I'm
He,
kind of trying to end the show. If you haven't tuned
okay,
into
of
that,
course, of course.
I got 8 minutes. Sorry, sometimes you just gotta be straightforward, but I do want, like, listen, Jeremy will be involved in this conversation. He's brilliant. I love listening to him, and he's always an inspiration. First, I have a little bit of humor because I did hear a lot of people say, wow, uh, you know, Ryan sounded like Skunk Man Sam. He was just dropping knowledge, right? So, just like the Vatican, we here at Hash Church, we have a new pope. Just wanted to announce that we have a new pope. Ryan Lee, you are the new pope of Hash Church. The orange smoke has billowed. You are the pope, my friend. You are the pope. So, big shoes to fill.
It's the Bitcoin orange smoke coming out of the Vatican.
Yes, exactly. So that picture is actually the photo that announces that there is a new pope in the Vatican. For those of you that don't know, that's what that photo was from. That was from Vatican City. And when they released that orange smoke, it kind of looks like they're puffing on the low-grade doo-doo butter from the old school CO2 before they kind of figured out how to tune in those different
Marcus,
variables.
real quick before you go, would you mind sharing those photos of David?
Yes, let me just one quickly here see. Oh yeah, good,
My
good.
Skunk Man
First, those
Sam
are, fuck, I don't
tribute.
even know where they are, man. Okay, here we go. So this is, man, I'll tell you, if I was a breeder, I'd have this tattooed on my back. This is awesome. Straight up awesome. So there's Dave doing what Dave did best. Blowing pollen towards the ladies. Let me see
Yeah,
this
this
one.
was in
David
these
Watson
pictures.
claims to have the biggest cannabis library. Look at his face. It goes so good with the he's just like, yeah.
Why, yes, I
and
do.
I think
that
these were
picture's
both of them were in British newspapers, and no,
yes, there it
sorry,
is.
I think these were both in British newspapers, and then there was another one from like a long time ago, a harvest festival up in this one. That one was a long time ago.
That's awesome, dude.
So anyhow, thought
So
I'd share
good.
those with you guys.
I'm glad you
Amazing.
did. I'm glad you did. In the meantime, what was I going to do? I was going to say thank you everyone for the great conversation today. I love the tension. I love the intensity. It means we love and we're passionate and we're at the same time empathetic. And I hope that everything works out for everyone that was on the show today. I want to thank Nick for coming on. Definitely want to have that dude on again. He was very just great knowledge. I loved everything that came out of his mouth. I loved his vibe, and he was intelligent.
I'd
And he
like
was.
to I'd like
You'd
to
like to.
thank our sponsor, Pfizer BioNTech.
Actually, I should thank my sponsor, Press Club Co. Thank you for that. Thank you, Grandmaster LEDs. Thank you, Puffco, and thank you, Bubble Bags, because that's certainly something I should do here at the end of the show. And just really thanks everyone for watching another episode. I was counting, and it seems like we're about at 37 episodes that we've done in a row from the 5.0 into doing that every week, which we're now at 17 weeks. So looking to hit 52 for this year. Consistent Hash Churches. Thanks everyone for coming on. I do want to finish it with really once again. I heard back from some friends in Amsterdam that Soma is not doing well right now. He could use everyone's support. He had a really rough day today. So our love goes out to both Soma and Wade, two of our elders in this wonderful cannabis community that we all share in. Never, it always makes me feel terrible knowing my brothers are in pain or in a bad space, but I do believe in that unseen that Nick was speaking about, and that unseen is the pathways that energy travels, and if you have happy, positive, good thoughts about people, it certainly can't hurt. If this is the holographic universe that we're living in, and we are in some insane simulation, then we do have more control over it than we may know. So thank you everyone for being a part of this community. Thanks to really cannabis. Thank Johnny B for winning the press bags, and I May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. I hope to see you all next week. Peace out.